Right, so we're going to get started. This particular webinar, I think, is a very important one. It's something that we'll talk about reasons, not just now, but throughout your career that you may start looking for another job, and reasons that those are actually wrong reasons, because many times people start looking for a job when it's actually probably the dumbest thing they could do. And as a recruiter and someone that makes money placing people in jobs or selling people access to jobs, like on Law Crossing, this may seem like something that I shouldn't talk about, but I'm at a stage in my career where it doesn't really matter if you want to look for a job through me or not. It's just how it is. This is what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about are the mistakes that people make when they decide to search for a job and the reasons those are wrong. And if you are making these mistakes, you'll probably make them again and again, and it can negatively affect your ability to have a good legal career. Very important topic. Pretty excited to talk about it because I think it can help you. It can help almost every attorney. And the thing about moving firms is attorneys, partners find reasons to move firms all the time. Associates find reasons to move firms. Everybody finds reasons to move firms, but many times the reasons for moving firms are actually wrong. It's more about them than the person that they're mad about. Most of your problems, and frankly, whether it's here or in life, have more to do with you and your decisions and taking accountability for things than it may have to do with the other person. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, of course, there are great reasons for switching firms, and I've covered those in previous webinars, I believe, but this is really the dark side and why you should stay at your firm and for different reasons. One thing, too, that's important now, too, is that this is a slow legal market. It's not doing anywhere near as well as it was a couple of years ago. So there's actually one big argument to be made that unless your firm is really slowing down, you think you're going to lose your job, you're much better off in a place that's safe than one that may not be in the future. So it's the devil versus the one you don't. This is a live webinar, and what that means is it means that I will be taking questions at the end as we're going along. If you have any questions, you can enter them in the Q&A. So they may be about specific points I'm talking about. A lot of times people at the end of the webinar will add in just general career questions, and I'm happy to answer those too. So these webinars, I'm happy to take as much time as you like to answer questions during the course of the webinar. Again, this is, from my opinion, a very important topic, and I encourage you to hopefully take notes and learn about it. So attorneys are always thinking, and law firm attorneys, about switching positions. And there are a lot of reasons to search, but I would say 50% of the time, many attorneys are searching for new positions for the wrong reasons. And if you're unhappy, it's generally not where you work, not about where you're working. It's more often about you and how you think about the world and your position. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how are you thinking about you? And based on the way you think about yourself, can make a big difference. So I would say one of the biggest reasons that people look for jobs, and I frankly understand this reason quite a bit, is you may be compensated as well as you want, but you feel unappreciated. And this is especially the case, used to be for millennials, is millennials were always told how great they were. And then they got into law firms and it was the opposite. And so they weren't happy. And a lot of times partners I talk to all the time, when they want to move, they feel like the firm doesn't appreciate them either. They can go to another firm and make more money, or they can go to another firm and take clients with them, or give clients lower billing rates or whatever. And so they feel like they're giving away a lot of the fees they collect to support unproductive partners and also associates. So they feel unappreciated. Senior associates often feel unappreciated because even though they're making very good livings, they may feel unappreciated because they're not partners. Junior associates feel unappreciated because they may think there's too much work, or because they're given busy work, which most juniors, who else is supposed to do it? They feel unappreciated for that. And the point is that just as society, if you work anywhere or you start your own business, society is not warm and fuzzy for people trying to start their own businesses. And law firms are not warm and fuzzy either. It's just how employers are. So I go to law firm lobbies all the time, and I go to funerals. And I would say that at funerals, which are very depressing places, people are obviously much nicer. They hug and obviously a funeral home can be more welcoming than a law firm. But when you go into law firms, most of the time, you're not hearing a lot of laughter. People are competitive with each other. Partners are competitive with other partners. Associates are competitive with other associates. Everybody's competitive and they're under a lot of stress. And that's why the job pays a lot of money, is because of the stress. And people may smile when they see each other in a funeral home, but a lot of attorneys aren't really smiling at each other inside of law firms. And many times there's a lot of competitive pressure between different partners in law firms, and excuse me, they just don't even smile at each other. Associates may not smile at each other, partners may not smile at each other, and it's often rare for an associate to hear what sounds like a genuine thank you for doing a good job, because they just don't. And this is just how it works. And in almost all cases, it's not going to change by going to another law firm. Sometimes people think, oh, it's going to change because I have this big firm pedigree, or I went to this great law school, and people are going to really think highly of me if I go to this other great firm. And that's just not the case. You're expected that it's going to be the same thing. Even if you think you have a really good background, it's going to be the exact same thing. And in the few decades I've been doing this job, one of the more interesting things I've seen is watching talented attorneys with top credentials being upset because they're not treated as special people by law firms just because of their great credentials. And that just doesn't happen. Once you're in a law firm, your job is to compete with other attorneys and do the best you can. And those credentials are something that got you in the door and give you the right to do the work, but they don't really matter. Law firms want you to be smart, motivated, and look good to clients. They like it when you have good credentials, but they're not paying you for the credentials. They're paying you to be there and do the work. And so regardless of your level, you have to remember that law firms are your employers, and you're working for them, and they have all sorts of stresses of their own. Their stresses include getting clients to pay, paying staff, preventing partners from leaving, replacing associates that are leaving, staff suing them, all sorts of issues, getting work done. So the law firms honestly do not have the time to appreciate you. That's not why they're there. They're there, and the appreciation you're going to receive is a paycheck, your bonus, and frankly, the right to work there. If you're working at a big law firm and getting to work on behalf of big clients, you're learning a lot. If you're working at a small law firm and doing workers' compensation or personal injury, you're going to get that experience too. And you can change that experience and start a huge business if you want with it. You're getting training and experience and the right to work someplace. That's it. And if you don't feel appreciated because you're getting experience in a certain practice area, or you're learning how to be an attorney, or you're getting paid, then you don't have to feel appreciated. The appreciation is getting the experience. And these things, we're learning that you're getting paid, you're getting experience, and you have the right to work somewhere is a huge show of appreciation. And it's something that a lot of people take for granted. And when it's not there, you will miss it. So let me just tell you something that happens all the time. I get these calls. I don't take these calls really much because they're just painful, but we get these calls all the time, every day of the week, constantly. We'll have attorneys that are 15 years out of law school, 20 years out of law school, and maybe started a great firm and left, or a small firm, it doesn't really matter, left and then went and did something else. They went to work in government, they went in-house, and then they come back and they say, wow, I would be more than happy to go back and work in a firm as a first-year associate. I can't believe how much these jobs pay now. So think about that. If you start out in a big firm and you're making all this money, in 15 years, you will probably be more than willing to go back and make that big salary again. This happens the majority of the time to attorneys that leave these big law firms or even mid-sized law firms and make all this money, because in the real world, you don't get paid this much money. You also don't get that experience. If you go to work in-house, you're just going to get, most of the time, a variety of experience. You go work in the government, it's the same thing. So these are all important things to think about. You're appreciated by being there and having a job. So a lot of times people will leave because there's too much. They say there's too much work. I'm being overworked. This is horrible. This is a very common complaint. It's extremely common. It's more common, by the way, among junior and mid-level associates than it is senior associates and partners. But the law firm runs, the entire law firm wouldn't run unless it had associates bill as many hours as possible in exchange for a fixed salary. How do you think hospitals and stuff make money? They make money by having residents and other people work pretty much for free. At least in the law firm, you're getting a big salary in a profession, and that's just how it works. Law firms of all sizes function to the extent that you expel more hours to them than you're paid. That's just how it works. And in exchange, you will be considered for partner, and that's just how it is. Their job is to make as much profit as they can off of your work, just as it is in a hospital, just as it is in our apprentice system. Germany has apprentice systems for craftsmen. Every possible place in the world that trains a professional does so in exchange for paying them less money and turning them into profit centers. In a law firm, it typically takes about 5 years for an attorney to become competent. It's like the 10,000 hour rule. I think that there was Malcolm Gladwell who wrote a book about it, where it took about 10,000 hours for musicians and everyone to learn what they're doing. It's the same thing in the practice of law. You have what would be a big jump, like your first year where you learn a lot. Your second year, it's a little bit less. Your third year, it's a little bit less. But the more time goes on, you start learning more and more things, client relations, getting business, more sophisticated approach to legal problems. And again, if you're blessed to be at a large firm and get paid that much during your apprentice time, that's awesome. If you are at a small firm and getting trained by one attorney or two attorneys during that time, that is awesome. It's a very good financial transaction for you. The more work you get, by the way, the more proficient you're going to become. You don't learn how to be an attorney in law school. You learn how to take the bar exam, and then everything else you have to do after that is all learned on the job. You have to have experience. You have to have clients. Starting a new firm because there's too much work is ridiculous. You're getting trained and paid to be somewhere. So why would you switch because there's too much work? Too much work means that the firm is successful and that there's an opportunity for advancement. If you can figure out how to endure these stresses that come from transitioning to a pupil to a trained attorney, then that's great. Now, I am not saying that you need to be someplace where you're working 3,000 hours a year and going insane. That's just not a good option. Law firms know that if they give you too much work, you're going to leave. So I'm not talking about spending all night in the law firm 7 days a week. You need to set your own limits. And the problem is a lot of attorneys are very impressionable and don't set limits. So you need to set limits for what you're going to do with your time. And that means that you should not think that if you need Saturdays off, or you need a half day on Sunday, or you even need Sundays off, you set those limits, because if you don't set those limits, no one's going to do it for you. So you have to learn how to set your own limits and not get taken advantage of so you can stay sane and you have something to give. But the first 5 years are really a learning experience. The other thing is that if you look at doctors, they sleep in the hospital, they sleep in closets and things when they're learning, because that's just how it is. And the more work you do, the more competent you're going to be. You're going to see all sorts of connections that other people won't see. You're just going to your brain's going to change. You're going to learn how to do all this stuff. And if you leave the law firm and go in-house or to the government or something, which would be completely crazy during that time, then you're never going to learn how to practice law. And you're going to be dependent. You're just going to stop at one point and not ever move. One of the things, too, I just wanted to say about going in-house, this is a dream of all young attorneys. If you go in-house and you want to work for a big company, most of the time, if a big company wants a general counsel, they're going to hire a partner out of a law firm, preferably a large one, but not always. They're not going to hire a second-year associate and expect that person to advance. They're going to hire someone with very sophisticated legal skills. So leaving is not a good experience, not a good idea if you want to be a successful in-house attorney. It's incredible. Leaving a good job where you're getting trained would be like getting a medical degree and never doing a residency and learning what it takes to be a doctor. Young doctors work hard mainly because they make the hospitals money, but they're also work very hard because they're expected to be competent when they're tired, when they're overworked, all that sort of thing. It's the same thing with practicing law. So if you leave early because there's too much work, it's likely to go to waste. And the whole thing is your job when you're young is to make older attorneys as much money as possible and help the law firm survive. And so you should never leave a firm just because there's too much work and it gives you too much to do, especially when you're young. Now, if you're not paid for that work and you're paid 1/3 of what your colleagues are at a similar firm during that time, then yeah, maybe you think about it, or even half, or even closer to 60, 70%. But The firm, you need to get the experience. And the presence of a lot of work just means there's a lot of opportunity for advancement, and the firm is doing something right. And lots of work also means you have job security. No law firm. When I was at my first law firm, they had so much work that they never gave reviews. They were like, we are not going to touch this. And because they needed people, everyone had job security. No one would lose their job unless they did something just completely incredible. Never be unhappy that there's a lot of work. Now, again, there are reasons to leave if there's a lot of work and you can go someplace else better. I just want to cover those real quickly. One reason would be that there's not enough that you could work on potentially much more sophisticated work in your practice area, get better experience and exposure to larger clients. So there are some reasons for it, but in general, getting trained during your first 5 years is very important. Too much work is not a good idea to leave. Also, the more work there is, this is just very important to understand, the more opportunity you have to make partner. Because if the firm has a lot of work, they're also going to have a lot of work for senior people probably. And those senior people, they're going to need to be partners if they're going to keep them around and if they're working hard. So it's just something to think about. Another reason that people leave is because they say morale is low. And I hear this all the time. I hear this from attorneys that are working in 2,000 person law firms saying the morale is low and everyone's unhappy. Of course, this is really how every law firm is. Morale is low in most law firms. Morale is affected when people leave. Morale is affected when there are rational and mean partners, which there are at almost every firm. Morale is low when someone's friend or colleague gets fired. Morale is low when the law firm loses a lot of work and clients are lost, when cases are lost, when people don't make partner, when there are layoffs, and when there's too much work. Morale is low for a lot of reasons. And sometimes law firms will have bad news in the press. Every law firm, by the way, gets hit by the press and bad things said about it. The larger the law firm, the more often these things occur. That's just how it is. And you shouldn't worry about it. Sometimes bonuses are lower than people believe they should be. And that's not a reason to leave either. Sometimes your bonuses are lower than they are peer firms. Sometimes your salary is a little bit lower when there's raises at different firms. All this stuff happens. And sometimes the morale is low when the economy is hot, and it's low when it's cold. And there's very few times in almost all law firms morale is high. Everyone is competing with each other for work. Everyone is competing for favor with different types of people. So of course the morale is going to be low. There's some law firms where the firm does an excellent job of keeping morale high. Most of the time these are smaller firms, but this exception is really the norm. And it's not the norm. And morale is almost always going to be low. Wherever you work, you have to understand that morale is low. It's just the nature of law firms. Now, there are law firms that people are very proud of because they're growing. There are law firms that are very proud of because of the brand. But the idea is that most law firms, it's just how the business model works. They hire young people, they work them very hard, and then they replace them when they leave or get fired. It's just how it works. People make partner, and then many times they don't have business. And unless they get business, they're let go. And that's just how it works. Partners with business are often not paid what they feel like they deserve, and they leave, and that affects morale. Sometimes they take a lot of associates with them, and there's just constant cycles that ensure that morale is always going to be low in a law firm. And the solution is not to look for a new job, it's to learn how to be happy in that environment. That's it. So you have to realize that you can look at the good in any environment, or you can look at the bad. And people always want to look for the bad. You need to put your mind in a place where this stuff just bounces off you and you concentrate on what's good for you. And I'll just tell you here personally, like at BCG, for example, like we used to hire people, and some people we hired had been at their last firm or employer for 8 years or 6 years and things like that. And others have been at their last employer for 1 year or for 8 months or 2 years. The people that were at the firms for 8 months and 2 years always left within 8 months or 2 years. And when they left, they said, oh, things are changing, we don't like it, and this sort of thing. And the people that were at their last employer for 8 years came to our firm and stayed there 8 years or 10 years. It's just certain people will see the world in different ways. And those people that stay 8 years and 6 years and things, all did well. And they did well because they committed and they didn't let this stuff bother them. A lot of times people will say others are leaving and you decide to look as well. Okay, so if you're in an office with 200 people and people are leaving, that's pretty much normal. It's just how it works. So this is stupid here, but there's a man, and he's actually no longer alive. He had an overdose, but this man I know is very wealthy and has been married a few times, and he controls his trophy wife and basically dictates who she can associate with. And so he had a few failed marriages, actually no, one failed marriage before, one failed marriage. And he realized that if his wife, anyway, it doesn't matter. But he realized that if his wife started associating with women who are unhappy in their marriages and complaining all the time about their husbands, then his wife would start doing the same. And most of those women that were doing that ended up getting divorced. And so he basically concluded that if my wife is associating with people, and this is a very successful businessman, like someone that it's not important to get into, but it made a lot of money, tens of millions, not more, in business and in a business that he started, and he had all these kind of things. And so he realized that unhappiness is contagious, and people will basically, if it's a race to the bottom where everyone's unhappy, that's what we'll do. If it's not, we'll do something opposite. He witnessed this with his previous wives, with friends of his and their wives as well. And he's been happily married for 15 years, or was before he died. And credits this to making sure he and his wife spend their time with people that are happy in their marriages. And I think that's a good rule. You spend your time at work with people that are happy with your job. You spend your time at work with people that have figured out how to make things work when others don't. Because unhappiness, stress, and all these negative emotions are contagious. If others in your firm start looking for jobs, they're going to look for your approval. You start doing the same as well. People become like those around them. I remember when I joined my second firm, I made friends with this woman and I was in a relationship at the time, so I was just friends with her. But when I got there, she was stopping by my office, saying how great the firm was and how great her job was. And then gradually over time, it started when she would stop by, she would just talk about how horrible the place was. And I'd be like, I don't want to be part of this conversation. I'm trying to succeed and do well here. And she got very mad. She said, someday you'll realize how bad of a place it is, and that sort of thing. And then she left and went to another firm, did the same thing, and then ended up trying to have her own practice. And that didn't work out. And then this is how people are. The law firm model is just built on constant destruction and renewal. And this is just how it works. And so due to this, and there's always going to be people leaving and looking for jobs all the time because they're unhappy. And if that suits you, being around those unhappy people, it's depressing. Negativity is not good for you. It hurts your career. There's no point to being part of it. All it's going to do is lead you in a bad direction. And if that's where you want to go, that's fine, but you're going to throw away your career if you spend your time with these people. It's very easy to spend your time with these people. Drug users, if you use drugs, you will find drug users and be friends with them. This is just how it works. If you're negative, you will find other people that are negative. If all you're doing is you're on the way up, you will find other people that are on the way up and be close to them. It's just how it works. The best response is to not get psyched out by people leaving your law firm, but instead to just realize that this is part of the cycle. And you want to stay around positive people, because if you stay around positive people, it's going to rub off on you. People are tribal animals. They want to follow what others are doing. And you shouldn't care what others are doing. You should put your head down and get to work. And even associating closely with people on the way out can hurt you if you're seen as taking their side. It's just how it works. So if you're seen with negative people and the law firm realizes that these are your friends and these are the people you spend time with, well, the law firm's going to think you're part of the same thing as well. You need to be very careful, and you should be friends and close to people that are doing, not those who are not. So this is very common. People get a poor review and not praised by the law firm, or you've gotten them in the past. I want to be clear of something. If you go to law school, you probably were a good student, or at least enough enthusiastic to get into college. You probably did better than average, if not extraordinarily well in college, and were praised for your work. You probably did okay in law school, if not better, passed the bar. And so you wound up in a law firm, which is very hard to do and takes a lot of work. All along the way, you were praised for passing the bar, for going to law school, for all these things and getting all this positive feedback. but no one actually took you and broke you like you would break a racehorse and make you learn how to work for others and do all these things. It's just never happened. So sometimes you may have been in another job. You may have been an entrepreneur. You may have worked doing something else and gotten positive feedback. But a law firm is about breaking you in and making you an attorney. It was interesting that I was in a law firm as a summer associate in New York, and I billed maybe 35 hours a week. There was a major recession at the time. It was like in the mid-1990s, and things were not going well in most law firms in New York. And I thought about it like, okay, I need to get in by 9 and take a short lunch, and I can leave at 5. That's just how I thought about my job at the time, which is not a smart way to think about it. My first review, halfway through the summer program, I couldn't believe how harsh it was. It was in a dark panel room where I could hardly see anybody's faces. And it almost was like a movie set about a sinister law firm. And everyone was very unhappy with me. And it just did not go well. I thought that my life was over. Every little thing that I'd done that looked wrong was criticized. No one talked about the things I did well. Everyone basically gave me a very bad review, and I didn't know what was going on. And I also asked all the summer associates how their reviews were. And it wasn't a huge class because it was a recession. It was maybe like 15 or 20 people. And with only one exception, all the other reviews were bad. People were like, I don't know what the frick happened. This is crazy. And these were people from great law schools that had been done well. And the only exception was a woman from my law school whose sister was an attorney at a big firm and doing very well. And her sister had said, the only thing this law firm is going to care about is you working as many hours as you possibly can. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for people that will show up and bill a lot of hours. And she received a very good review because during her first 5 weeks of the summer, she'd worked very hard and really dedicated herself to the job. And so I started doing the exact same thing. I started billing 70 hours a week for the next 5 weeks, showing up on weekends. And there was nothing really that much different about the quality of my work. It wasn't great that it was compared to what it was later, but I just did more work. And at the end of the summer, the woman and I were the only people that received offers. Other people continued not billing a ton of hours, doing stupid things like working till 6:30 and then taking a company car home instead of working till 11:30 and doing that. She and I were the only ones to receive offers because we were giving so much to the firm. And so I realized that the firms, all they cared about. And honestly, that was what the review was about. The review basically wasn't telling me that I needed to do better work. It was finding fault with the work that I had done because I hadn't billed enough hours. And this is one of the things that happens in law firms. People with lots of hours often do not get poor reviews. It's just how it works. But another thing to understand, and this is very, very important, is almost all junior associates inside of law firms are reviewed quite critically until sometimes their second year, sometimes their third year, sometimes rarely until their fourth year. But definitely, usually their first review is going to be bad. Their second review is going to be maybe a little better. Their third review might be a little better, but they can be very scary. And what the law firm's doing is the law firm is trying to make you into an attorney and is trying to show you what you need to do and how to raise the bar. And when you get to be a third or fourth year at some places, and through maybe your seventh or 8th year, the law firms are going to give you decent, if not stellar reviews. I couldn't believe some of the reviews that I see for mid-level associates. When you're a mid-level associate, by the way, you are profitable. The reason you're profitable, just so you understand, is because they don't need to write off a lot of your time. They can give you most things to do, and you can do them. You don't charge as much as senior associates, so your billing rate isn't really an issue, and you save the clients a lot of money. And so it makes the partners look good to give you the work to do because their clients are saving a lot of money compared to what a senior associate would charge. And you don't need a lot of oversight. You're not making mistakes like a junior associate would. So if you're a third or fourth year associate, this is even the fifth, that's when you're going to start getting better reviews. Just what you understand. You take all the feedback. It's very hard as a junior associate, and then you take that feedback and improve. And then as you get more senior, you'll be told cryptic things like you're on the right track or everything looks good, and you don't know. And if the work slows down, you may just be asked to leave. So it's just how it works. And so, or the firm won't be nice to you, because what happens when you get senior is your billing rates start getting similar to what the partners are. All clients want to have the partner do the work. And so that's a problem, especially when the billing rates are similar. All partners make more money when they do the work themselves, as opposed to having others do it. And then sometimes, this is another one, people think, oh, I'm going to be happier in a boutique. And this is a fantasy of attorneys from large firms transferring to a boutique and being happy. They believe that the pressures of a large firm are suddenly going to disappear and they're going to be happier if they're in a boutique firm. This is just something that a lot of them believe. And the idea is that there'll be fewer hours, the attorneys will be nicer to each other, and life will be much better. And that sometimes is the case, but there's a problem with this logic. And this is something that all people that go to boutiques almost always eventually understand. All law firms are businesses and trying to make money. Any firm that's a boutique that's owned by a few individuals wants to, or 3 or 4, or whatever the number of partners, wants to make more money. Of course they do. You would too if you were part of a firm like that. So everybody wants to make more money. And they're not making as much money now as a boutique, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to. All businesses, their objective is to grow. Firms big and small want to bill a lot of hours and have people there working as hard as possible. Everybody does. This is just how it works. So regardless of the practice area, work can be very busy inside of law firms. And when it gets busy, you're going to be expected to work hard. Law firms love it when they get a lot of work to do. And that's just how it works. If they get a big case, if they get a big transaction, there's no reason that they're going to say, hey, we're a boutique, we're not going to work hard on this. They're going to be very excited. The boutique might become a mid-sized firm. This is what happens to boutiques. And the idea of a boutique is that you're going to have less support. So if you're trading a big firm for a smaller one, you're going to have to do a lot more things that you might not have to do in a large law firm, meaning secretarial work, paralegal work. If you're a mid-level senior associate, work that a junior associate would do. So this fantasy of a boutique really is tough. And the thing with a boutique is if things go bad in a boutique, they go really bad. Meaning if the firm loses business, they have to immediately let people go because they don't have a lot of other business. If someone doesn't like you, and if one of the 3 partners doesn't like you, then you're in trouble. If a group of partners with a lot of business leaves, or the firm loses a lot of one big clients, things go really bad. I've seen entire law firms, by the way, of 25 attorneys shut down if they lost a client. They're off the map, literally, just gone overnight. It's important to understand, smaller firms are often very dangerous. And so leaving a firm to go to a boutique is not always a good thing. And then the other thing that happens, if the boutique is successful, meaning it's doing well and it's doing work for good clients and it's in a niche, then it's almost always going to get absorbed by a larger firm. It just almost always happens. There used to be in the United States, when I started in this position 25 years ago, most of the patent prosecution and stuff was done by boutique firms or just firms that maybe are a little bigger than boutiques doing patent work. Law firms realized that this could be profitable work and basically went around and over the course of 10 to 15 years, absorbed every single one of them. And then when it absorbed them, it didn't know how to work a patent attorney. So the point is that these smaller law firms are often very dangerous. They often, if they're doing well, they're almost always merged into larger law firms. And where does that put you? You're back to a larger law firm. And again, if you upset someone in a smaller firm, you're in trouble. If you're a larger law firm, if you upset a partner, you could just avoid the partner and work for another one. But in a smaller law firm, this just never happened. Smaller law firms are better for a lot of people if you are comfortable with the people there. But your career can end much more quickly in a smaller law firm than a larger one. Smaller law firms also have less financial leverage. So large law firms are stable because they're built on multiple pillars and have different practice areas. As everyone knows, corporate can get very slow. When corporate gets slow, commercial litigation often picks up. And so or IP litigation. And so law firms that were relying on one type of business for everything suddenly are able to rely on another, and that keeps things going. So boutiques may just be in one practice area. So if corporate or patent or whatever slows down, they're going to be prone to going out of business. And they go out of business all the time. We have in our database, 50,000 law firms, and we're communicating with them all the time. And these law firms are just consistently going out of business and disappearing. So every week, like we'll get these email bounces, and one or two or three or five or 10 will have gone out of business over the past week. It's just what happens. And most of them are smaller firms. And so with fewer practice areas, they don't have the stability to keep you employed when bad things happen. The other thing for you to understand is if you go to a boutique, if you want to go in-house, if you ever want to go to another firm, you're going to have a much more difficult time getting into a larger firm than you might otherwise have, or an in-house compared to what a large firm would be. Everybody knows what it means to work at a great firm like DLA Piper or Dermot or something. Everyone knows what that is. But when you're with a boutique, they don't know. It's not a brand. It's not something the big companies are using. And so most in-house employers, almost all of them, are going to hire from a big firm or a bigger firm that they've heard of than some boutique that they don't know anything about. And then at a boutique, you're also going to have a much more difficult time bringing in significant clients. Just as you're very aware of brands, law firms, so are clients. Clients are very aware. They want to say, hey, we use this big firm, or we use this big firm. And that has a lot of cachet. It makes them feel special, and it looks better for them to use it. It looks better for the general counsel to use it. This is just how it is. And large companies that have a lot of business are typically going to go with large full-service firms instead of boutiques in their important matters. So what does that mean? That means if you go to work in a boutique, that you're likely, almost certain, to be with a firm that where it's going to be much more difficult for you ever to bring in large clients. And if you can't bring in large clients, you're not going to be able to ever make the kind of money you want to do. And you may be stuck at a certain level. So that's very difficult. But because of the lower billing rates, now this is very important, you will be able to bring in smaller clients. And those smaller clients will be clients that are of a caliber that you might not otherwise be able to bring if you were working at a larger law firm. So larger law firms are limiting, because if you want to go to work at a huge Chicago firm and you want to make partner, they're going to expect you to bring in very big clients. But if you're in a boutique with lower billing rates, this actually could give you a lot more employment stability. You just need to understand the advantage of what that is. Working for smaller clients is also going to probably make you less money, but not always. If you have business, you're going to have a lot more ability to make money from that. But boutiques don't have the same pricing power as other people do. So this is another thing that a lot of associates and other people are concerned about. They feel like they're not given enough authority. They want to run deals. They may want to take depositions early in their career. They may want to go to court. Who knows? But they often feel they don't have enough authority or responsibility. And so not having enough authority and upset about this is actually good from the perspective that it shows you're ambitious, hungry, and want to improve. Believe it or not, there are a lot of attorneys that are. I was talking to one the other day that was trying to do a completely different practice area. And I was like, why are you trying to do that? And he said, I like being a litigator, but I think I should do transactional work because I'm afraid to go to court. And so there's a lot of attorneys out there that really limit themselves in the practice areas they're in. But not having enough authority is often not a good reason to leave. I've worked with partners, for example, that are 25 years out of law school and practicing with major American law firms that have never done a trial. I've seen associates doing litigation in law firms that have never taken a deposition of a party. They may have taken of witnesses and things, but never of a party to a lawsuit. And a lot of corporate attorneys are experience the same sort of lack of responsibility early in their careers. And the largest law firms, the lack of responsibility and authority is actually a sign that the work is being done in a very careful, plotting way. You're learning almost wax on, wax off, the Karate Kid, where they were teaching these fundamentals before other things are done. You're learning a lot of stuff earlier in your career. And because you're not getting responsibility, doesn't mean you should look for a job. It means you're being drilled in the fundamentals. And keep in mind that if you start your career at age 25, you will be practicing. Think about the two presidential candidates. Each of them is over 80. So you can practice this career for 55, 60 years. And just because you're not given some authority early in your career is not a bad thing. And by the way, the people that have authority are partners. So what that means is if you're an associate or a senior associate or a counsel, you're essentially a soldier. So soldiers do what other people tell them to do. When you become a partner, you become a general and you can tell other people what to do. But that's just how it works. And even a general still has to report to other generals and higher ranking generals, which is how a law firm works. But that's just how it works. So another reason to leave is when attorneys have 8+ years of experience and they don't think they're going to make a partner in their firm, but they're not being asked to leave, they often will leave. And when they may actually be making over $500,000 a year and they're billing not even a ton of hours. So I speak with attorneys like this all the time, and they're often unhappy because they think they're not going to become partners in their current firms, yet they're not being asked to leave, and the firm is actually happy with them. And in a situation like this, you need to be very careful. There's generally no reason to look at other firms and see what is out there because you don't have the political and relationship capital. I always recommend that when attorneys are in this state that they're careful about leaving, because the amount of money that they make as a senior associate is often going to be actually more than they're likely to make in-house or with a smaller law firm. And then they have the ability to perhaps be made partner. You just don't know. But if a law firm is keeping you around as a senior attorney, it's very important to do the cost-benefit analysis on whether or not you should leave. And if the cost is greater than the benefit. I had this interesting thing happen, it was a few months ago, and I was talking to a woman that was like a 17th or something ridiculous, 15th year associate at a big New York law firm in Los Angeles, making, something crazy, like $670,000 a year. And she wanted to look for a job. And I'm like, why in the world? Who cares if you're an associate? Like, you're never going to get paid that much in-house. No law firm is going to pay you that much unless you have a lot of business. So if I were you, I would stick with this forever. And because what is the cost-benefit analysis? Now, she's not going to make partner. They told her they won't make her partner. They told her they won't even make her counsel. But if you go someplace else, you're just not going to have that. But what attorneys do, by the way, is they get upset with their role and then they leave. And where they leave, there's not as much money and they don't have the political capital and no one protects them because they've been at a firm for 15 years. They're not going to get fired, but they go someplace new and they don't have that. I would guess that about half the attorneys that leave large law firms at a senior level, they tend not to last very long in their next jobs, and they don't have situations that are as good as the next one. Often, if you commit to a law firm and you've been there 12, 13 years, they will tell you, if you do this, we want to make you partner. If you do this, we'll do it. But sometimes attorneys often will talk about how they want to start businesses. Young attorneys will do this. Older attorneys will do this. But one thing to think about, if you're senior and you want to start a business, is that most businesses, if you have a business and you're making $500,000 a year in a law firm, and you start a business that's doing $5 million a year, and you have a 10% profit margin, which is actually good for a business, but all the hassle and work of having a business, you're only able to make 10%, and maybe the next year you'll make $3 million. Then doesn't always make sense to leave. And in a law firm, you're a business. You're an individual little business saying, this is what I'm going to charge for my services, and think about it that way. So it's thinking about alternatives and what they are before making a move. And a lot of times attorneys will also move because they want a title. And that can actually make sense in a lot of cases. Like, I've met lots of attorneys that have left their firms because they wanted a different title, and they felt that if they got a different title, that would mean something to them. And it's possible that that's helpful. It actually, sometimes it's a good idea. And even if you're a counsel level attorney at a big law firm, you can often move to another large law firm that's not quite as prestigious. But just thinking about these options is very important, because if you become a partner level attorney at a small law firm, at a large law firm, in most cases, that law firm is going to want you to be, that law firm is going to expect you to make a partner to bring in business at some point. So that's going to be even less stability if you don't bring in business. a lot of people are unhappy and think it's because of their law firm. And it's important to understand that a lot of attorneys are unhappy. And this may actually mean that the law firm completely is not for you. Stress, disappointment, anger, depression, substance abuse, and health problems are on par for a lot of attorneys. And there's also something else that I want to bring up too. A lot of attorneys, they're unhappy even before they become attorneys. Now, it's not the rule or the norm. Most attorneys actually become unhappy during law school when this problem starts, but a lot of them are unhappy before they even become attorneys. And so what they do to cope with that unhappiness and these negative feelings is they throw themselves into school to distract themselves of their problems, and they're basically unhappy to begin with, and using school as an outlet to have some certainty and control in their lives when maybe their lives aren't great. And you need to work really hard to get into a good law school. You need to work harder than others and be competitive and really want to achieve something. And a lot of attorneys, regardless of the firm they're at, have histories of remarkable achievement. They're maybe Phi Beta Kappa, Order of Coif, and there's nothing wrong with this. But if you have this sort of drive, many times you're trying to prove something. You're trying to prove it to your parents. You're trying to prove it to people that had doubts about you when you were younger, to teachers that said you'd never amount to anything. I know that I had these reasons for being very motivated. And the problem is that you think you're going to get to a law firm and that's going to solve everything, but it's actually many times the exact wrong environment for someone that has these problems, this background, because instead of feeling important, and you're actually going to be in a position where you're exposed to stresses and things that brought you to the law firm in the first place. And so most of the successful attorneys I've ever spoken to and worked with, a lot of them are frankly very balanced, but more than, I would say, 50% of them have all sorts of issues that they're trying to prove to parents, people that didn't believe in them, friends or people that called them nerds when they were younger, beat them up, or things that maybe their family lost money. Who knows? And their family was something. And so they're trying to prove something. And a lot of attorneys are very unhappy. And you don't know if the problem's a firm or whether unhappiness is coming from something to do with the attorneys themselves. But it's a difficult topic. And I'm glad you're listening to this, because the makeup of a lot of these attorneys, that being in a law firm is not something that's going to solve it. And I have conversations with attorneys all the time where I discuss these things, and I find deep-seated issues where they get very defensive, and when you bring up certain things. And in some cases, I've lost candidates when I've tried to get to the bottom of this, because when you're bouncing around from job to job because you're unhappy about things that maybe the law firm didn't cause, you're jumping around is not going to solve this. A change of scenery isn't going to solve it. One of the things that they often talk about, I remember there was a friend of mine that was an alcoholic, and I was out with he and another woman, and her parents, one of her parents had been an alcoholic, and we were in a bar basically, and he was talking about how he wanted to move here and move that and move and get out of Los Angeles and move to a small town. And she said, and when he got up to go to the bathroom or something, he said, this is what all alcoholics do. They think that if they make a geographic change, then their lives are going to be better and everything's going to come better. Well, attorneys do the same thing. And again, this is this woman where she said her family would constantly move from town to town and think things would be better. They'd make new friends and everything. But this is just an alcoholic type thing. And this is something, a fantasy that a lot of people have with law firms. And so there's reason to be unhappy, but a lot of times you need to examine if there's something in your background that's making you feel like that. And then a lot of times people want to move because they think they'll be happy in another practice area. So they think, I don't like corporate law, I want to do litigation. I don't like litigation, I want to do corporate. I don't like litigation, I want to do environmental. And it's very important to understand that a lot of attorneys will try to say they're unhappy in a practice area. And people want to do this all the time. I see resumes with this all the time. People are unhappy with their existing practice areas. And there are big differences between different practice areas, but not a lot. Early in your academic career, people may develop different aptitudes. So some people will be interested in science and numbers, others be interested in reading and writing. And then Typically, if you're really good at English and reading and writing, you will major in history, anthropology, English, that sort of thing. And if you're really good at math and science, you'll probably major in something related to that, like economics or something. But at the most simplistic level, people are generally either a numbers person or a verbal person. And people, they look at your brain and they can say, they can figure out what you're motivated towards. And science and numbers people, if you're that kind of person, you're typically going to graduate, you're going to do best or like more naturally be interested in things like real estate, corporate, tax, patent, project finance, and things that involve that. And if you're verbal, you're typically going to be interested in litigation, employment, antitrust, and criminal law. And the thing is, this is just important to understand, is people that are really good at English and things can notice those skills in people that would be as well. And they almost naturally gravitate towards one another. And it's the same thing with people with these number disciplines that are really good. They can gravitate, they understand what each other, that the people that are like. The only reason to switch practice areas, in my opinion, is because of these two reasons. So if you're corporate and you're more verbal, then yes, you probably should be in a verbal discipline. If you're more math and science and stuck in or whatever in litigation, most corporate type attorneys would never want to do litigation, then you probably should switch practice areas. But other than that, most practice areas are pretty much all the same. Employment is just the same kind of back and forth fighting or family law that is in litigation. And if your mind is in a different bin, then yes, you should switch practice areas and we'll be happier. But other than that, you're going to be switching for the wrong reasons. So switching practice areas generally is not going to make you happier. And it's typically early in an attorney's career, they'll think, wow, this is stressful. Maybe I should switch practice areas. Maybe that's the reason I'm getting bad reviews. But most of all, that if the person is in like a verbal and they're verbal, or they're in a transactional and they're numbers, and then they're in the practice area is perfectly fine. The only thing that's not fine is trying to switch practice areas because there's not going to be any noticeable difference. So sometimes people will say, oh, I like litigation, but I think I would be happier doing employment. That's actually fun. That's okay. But law firms, you're doing pretty much the same thing, and you're not going to be noticeably happier or unhappier if you're doing another practice area. A lot of people will say they're bored and they enjoy looking for a new position, meeting new people, selling themselves, and the thrill of getting interviews and offers. There literally is a dopamine type rush that people seem to get from doing this. I don't know what it is, but they get very enthusiastic about moving employers, and they think that the next time is going to be the best. And they move around between firms like this, often because of the same reasons we covered earlier. Like they may have been in a position where they feel like they're criticized, or they don't feel liked anymore, it gets boring, and then they suddenly revert to looking for a job because it's something that they understand and feels good. And a lot of attorneys will apply to firms in Hawaii and Alaska and all over the world because they're thinking of what it would be like to work in these different places. And I think these geographic moves are often not the best. I think people should do their best to stay in the markets as long as they can. When you're in one market, you're learning and you're developing relationships, and you're never developing roots when you move. You have to start all these relationships and your reputation all over. In some cases may be a good idea, but generally it's not, unless you're going home, which in case, from where you're raised, or there's no work in your market. But the problem is if you are bored all the time in moving firms, law firms are going to be unlikely to trust you. They'll know you're just a mercenary and are likely to do it again. And being bored is no reason to move. I mean, you need to find ways to be excited about your job and not bored there, and do things that interest you and find things that interest you. And then you also need to find things outside of work that will give you experience. So this is another one, just working in-house. As I told you earlier, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. People believe that if they go in-house, there's going to be less stress, and therefore they should look for a job, and they're going to be happy and have more free time on the business side of the clients. I've written a lot about this elsewhere, and I encourage you to read this article. There's an article that discusses going in-house right here. But basically what happens to most resumes of people that go in-house is they go in-house and they eventually go in-house. Sometimes they're at the in-house job for a year, sometimes 2 years. They see that things aren't done as well in-house as a law firm. They may be or they may not have enough work, or let's talk briefly about this. You go in-house, you're a cost center, not a profit center, meaning the law firm, the company has to pay you whether or not you work or not. You typically are not generating income like other people are. You're likely to let go when the company merges, goes down, moves, a new GC comes in, a new CEO comes in, and or the company goes out of business. When you're in a law firm, you're actually generating revenue, so you're more likely to keep your job. Most people that go in-house do not stay a long time. But they typically, their first job, they might be only there a couple of years, then they leave. And if you thought it was difficult to get a job, an in-house job when you're in a law firm, it's even more difficult when you're coming from another in-house job. And all the skills that are valued inside of a law firm are often not, like risk averse, meaning finding fault in things and making arguments, are often not as popular when attorneys get inside of companies, because you're seeing people break the rules, you're not taking and showing them solutions, and you're basically unliked, like you're feared because people want to do things to make money, but you're preventing them. And so the young in-house attorneys make this mistake all the time. They get out of the company, many times they say, oh, it's unethical because companies are all bending rules. If you read the news, every company is in trouble. Amazon's in trouble this week from an antitrust suit. Google had antitrust suits. Like every company, crypto company, everyone's leaving. I mean, all this stuff, companies are impossible. Law firms are much more stable than companies, and you'll realize that when you go in-house. So what happens, you go in-house, and attorneys will go in-house from a large law firm or any law firm, and typically there's just all these different moves. And eventually what happens is I see the resumes because they're on my resume revision calls, and the resumes are all like, the person, you'll see that they were done by like a professional resume outplacement company, because what's happening, usually probably paid for by the last employer, is in-house attorneys are just discarded and like crazy. And not only that, but you don't ever generate business. And just as in law firms, there's a preference for young attorneys for jobs, there's also a preference for the same thing in in-house jobs. It's very difficult to get a job once you go in-house. It's companies and law firms all want to hire younger people. They want to hire people directly out of law firms that have those skills, that are younger and have them. And once you go in-house, you're just going to have a very difficult time getting jobs. Your skills are going to deteriorate because jobs of in-house attorneys are often to refer people to outside counsel. They get very good at it, and that continues. And the work quality, because you're not surrounded by other attorneys that are expecting to do the best work, is going to deteriorate. And you can't go back to a law firm. Law firms almost never, will hire an attorney from an in-house job to come back to a law firm. It just doesn't happen. And again, the companies are not fans of their in-house attorneys. The in-house attorneys tell people running the company what they can't do. This is what they're paid to do. But it's just the more negative you are, the more you're disliked. And so you often feel isolated. People will avoid you. And you also lose control of your career. You won't have clients. Clients are what give partners and law firms control, because they can take those clients and go elsewhere. They have a business, meaning if you work in a law firm and you have clients, that's a business. When I left the law firm as a fourth-year attorney, I had a business. I had at least a few $100,000 in work, the people that would actually pay me, but I could rely on. And had I stayed longer, I would have developed more business. But if I'd gone in-house, I would have thrown away that business and that opportunity. So there's a lot of dangers from that career choice. I just want everyone to understand that. The other big one is having a mentor at your current firm. If you have a mentor at your current firm and someone looking out for you, then you really ought to be careful about leaving. People get jobs. People become partners in law firms because they have mentors. People often will have their whole careers made by having an older mentor that gives them their book of business when they leave. And then the person suddenly has this big book of business. I was talking to an associate not too long ago that had moved firms with a partner she was with 3 times in 7 years. And that same partner had moved 3 times in the 7 years. And what happened to that partner is he would get to a firm and he would bring her along and a few other associates. And then the firm would typically guarantee him a certain pay, like for his first and second year. And then they would renege on it after a certain period of time. Very common. And then he would move to a new firm. And when she told me she wanted to move firms without him, I was like, you're crazy. Like, the last thing in the world you should do is go to a firm without this guy. because he was going to make her partner eventually, whatever firm he was at. He liked her work and she had job security. Obviously, she was doing good work or he would have not kept taking her along. And he kept asking her to go along. So if you have someone that's on your side in your firm and that has your back, it's going to be a huge challenge, if not impossible, for you to find another mentor again. Because if you have someone protecting you, this is a huge advantage. If someone's protecting you, this means your career is safe as long as this person has your back. I can think of so many instances where when I was practicing, I would see certain associates working directly with a really powerful partner. All of them made partner because I had someone on their back. So it's just very important. You can have a really good career just because one person has your back. Many times it has a lot of power. And then sometimes the firm is telling you have a future and then you decide to leave. If a firm's telling you something like that, and if you really believe they mean it and they have reason for saying that, then you have to be very careful about leaving. Because if the firm likes you and you have enough work, then you're going to have a future there. And if the firm's telling you that, then you have to think about, does it make sense for me to leave? Now, there are reasons to leave, which could be a bigger firm, more opportunity, and you have clients, the clients will be happier. But you have to be able to find a firm that's going to like you. And often when you go to a new firm, you may not have that ability. Or you may be a threat to people that were summer associates there and doing other things. Before most people get married, for example, they do have a lot of relationships with a lot of other people. But many relationships do not work out. And because they don't, most people marry the first person they date and find something that works. If you're in a relationship with because they found something that works, if you're in a relationship with a law firm and it works and you're doing well, then you ought to be very careful about starting at a new firm because in the new firm, you may not have a future. And having future in a law firm is really dependent on people liking you, having enough work in your practice area, being told you're doing good work, and having a good cultural fit. And cultural fit, by the way, is huge. So if you are clicking with the culture and you feel comfortable there, that people make you feel comfortable, then the last thing you should do is you're going to have a very hard time finding that. And culture you can feel culture when you walk into someplace. I can feel culture when I walk into different companies and law firms, and it's just a feeling that people pick up. And if you're in something where that's good, then that's important. So a lot of people will have this idea that they want to try another career before committing to a law firm. If you do that, you will almost always never be able to go back to a law firm. So you have pretty much one shot if you're in a law firm. You can go to other law firms and be okay, but once you leave the law firm world, it becomes almost impossible to come back. That's like telling other people, and this could work out, that you want to see other people for a while and then try to start up again. Now, that can work out, but generally that doesn't. It can, but law firms, once you've decided to leave, you're most likely going to leave again. There's a rule. There's all these rules that I've encountered but the biggest one is never rehire someone. If you rehire someone, they're always going to leave for the same reasons they left the last time. And by the way, law firms almost exclusively hire from law firms. So I've been in this business for 25 years, and I can tell you with almost 100% certainty that you're going to be 99% better off if you want to get a job in a law firm coming from a law firm. Even taking a federal clerkship or something during your third or fourth year, or fifth or sixth of practice and trying to go back to a law firm can be a little difficult. So if you're in a law firm, you need to make it work, and you really only get one shot. So once you leave a law firm, the law firm's concluded that's not what you want. You want something else. And if you come back, you're probably going to have the same conclusion again. And it's not worth them investing in you. They'll invest with someone that's coming with a law firm. What would you do if you had the choice to do something whether it looked like it was permanent or get involved with someone or whatever, where the person was definitely interested in people like you as opposed to something else? You have to think about that. It is possible, by the way, to leave and take a very important position in government if it's high ranking. Some people go to work in different branches of the government, international trade and things, and then want to come back. And if you have rare experience, it can work, but not always. So most of the time. And a lot of times people will leave these firms like Sullivan and Cromwell and go to incredibly important positions in government and then be able to come back. But it's rare and it doesn't occur very often. Attorneys are really classified in these camps, the junior associates, mid-level associates, senior associates, and partner-level attorneys. To become a mid-level associate can take about 5 years generally before you become competent. And again, if you are trained and being paid during this period, this is a good deal. Like, you are developing skills, ways of thinking, access to large clients, and all sorts of stuff that you're never going to get later in your career, because no one's going to take the time to do it again. And once you leave it, you lose that connection. You can go to another firm, but you're better off pretty much most of the time staying where you're at if it's good. And the same thing goes for smaller firms. If you could be doing all sorts of practice areas like consumer facing, whether it's trust and estates or social security law or whatever it is, at a smaller firm, you still want to learn. You want to learn how they get business. You want to learn how to talk to different types of clients, what clients are likely to pay, what aren't. So whatever practice area you're in or whatever firm, it doesn't mean to be a large firm. You can always be learning. And if you start at a new firm, it's not going to change the fact that you're in training, but a lot of stuff it's going to be difficult and may make it more difficult, because the law firm knows that you may leave, and so they're less likely to give you a lot of things that they might if you stay. So if you leave a law firm during this period and go in-house or into the government or something else entirely, you're never really going to learn how to practice law if you leave early in your career. And all this experience and training that you could get that would make you a better attorney are often going to go to waste. And mid-level attorneys are often making the mistake when they start to know what they're doing and when they start to become profitable. But not always. If you leave as a mid-level attorney, you can often get into a much better firm. So if you are doing a practice area that's very active and you're at a smaller to mid-sized firm and you've gotten that training, then yes, then that may make be big. But if you started at a firm as a summer associate and you go through this whole thing and then leave during this time, it can be disadvantageous. Law firms love the idea of people that started out there early, whether out of law school or as summer associates, and have continuity and know how things work. And if you do that, it can really be a huge benefit. And senior associates often get restless. They're concerned they won't become partner. They're concerned they should be doing something else. They're not being paid what they think they should be doing, but they're not being asked to leave. And often that's a mistake. Law firms want to keep you up in the air about what's going to happen. The only reason to leave at that level many times is if you don't have a mentor or you don't see a future there. But most of the time, you have to be very careful about leaving and be very deliberate about what you're doing. They're not usually going to fire you and ask you to leave right away. They may give you 6 months and they give you a year. So you're always going to have time to find something. And they'll give you usually much more than 3 months. And there's no harm in looking for a job if you don't have to. But if there's not pressure to leave, then there's really no problem. And the same thing goes for income partners. They're going to have a difficult time. Partners with business have business reasons. And I'm not really going to criticize that because there often are very good reasons. But the point is, if you leave jobs for the wrong reasons, it's going to harm your career. And if you're going to switch jobs, and you really need to know what you're doing before you do. And I believe firmly, because I see this. I mean, I see this from a 30,000 or 35,000 foot level, that firms' careers are often very much harmed by moving for the wrong reasons than they are by staying. So very important. Moving can be fun, can be exciting. You can find new things to like about the new firm that you might not have liked at your existing firm. But you may actually be setting yourself up for something that doesn't benefit you in the long run. Okay, so I'm glad we got through that relatively quickly compared to the amount of information I had to cover. What I'm going to do now is I'll take a quick break, and then I will come back in 1 or 2 minutes, or maybe, and when I do, I'll take questions. It can be about this or anything that we may have, not anything related to your career. Come back in just 1 minute. Okay, so we will go to the Q&A. Let me start. Today I'm going to start towards the bottom. Let me just see here. Okay, so the first question is, I'm struggling with the idea of staying in my current firm after a series of negative performance evaluations. How can I reconcile my desire for professional growth with the reality of poor reviews, and what benefits might there be to remaining where I'm at? Okay, so that's a really good point. There's kind of two types of reviews. There's a review to pay attention, stop making dumb errors, work better with others, be more respectful, come into the office more, work harder, FaceTime, all that sort of thing. These are reviews that if you get these reviews, these are on you, meaning you need to improve. And so you need to listen to these reviews very carefully if you're receiving them, because if you are making dumb errors, you're not working well with others, you're talking, not being excited about getting work, then that's a problem. I mean, you need to improve. And if you're not doing those things. And so it's very important to always put yourself in the shoes of the person you're working for and see what could I do to improve these things. Now, sometimes you may have been done such a poor job with all this stuff that you do need to leave because you've just burned all your political capital and that's it. But if you can fix this stuff, you're much better off just for your future reputation of fixing it while looking for a job. You always want to do the best you can to fix these things. And these are the mistakes that junior attorneys will make. They'll get assignments and not listen carefully about what's needed. They won't look to see, they'll make dumb errors. They won't proofread things and try to get them turned in fast enough. They won't basically try to get in and work better with other people. They won't be respectful to senior associates or people that are above them. They won't work as hard as they should. As a junior person, you're supposed to work hard. They won't be seen. They won't be excited about getting work. They won't go out of the way to get work. So these are some mistakes you typically make. But other times, the firm will give you poor reviews. The firm will give poor reviews because they just want you to. Give me 1 second here. Okay, they're asking you. Oh, sorry. Hate when this happens. But they're asking you to leave because they're telling you the stuff basically because they don't think you're a good fit. So if you do improve and you do all these things and you're still getting these bad reviews, then it may be in your best interest to leave. You also need to look at what does the firm do? What have I seen happen with people that are like me that are having issues? Have they asked them to leave? Have they fired them? What happens? You need to watch the firm very closely. But if you're getting these reviews that are poor and you feel like you're getting reviewed for things that are not in your control, then you should be looking for a job, especially if these just continue, because most of the time, poor reviews are an opportunity for you to improve. Athletes have coaches, successful executives have coaches, especially high-level ones. Everyone has coaches. Presidents have coaches. So even presidents of countries have coaches. I used to work with someone that was a president that used to talk to presidents and coach them. Everyone has coaches. And so there's nothing wrong with people making you get better. That doesn't mean there's something wrong. Doesn't mean it's an opportunity. So is this coaching type stuff, or is this the firm really trying to get me to leave? And are my peers getting good things? But you need to try to fix whatever they're telling you to. And then if you fix them, then you're often going to be much better off in the long run. So I recommend doing what you can to fix things. One other thing I just wanted to say to everyone is that the questions, if your name and you're signed into Zoom, I won't use your name. So I know people want to be careful about their identities of these calls, so that's fine. Next question. So again, I won't use your name if you type a question and you're worried about that. Yeah, I struggle with paranoia and negativity after working for a firm that was going downhill. It was a good question. So, let's see. Going downhill and let go nearly all of associates shortly after hiring them. Wow. It's hard to shake this need to look for myself only mindset when I know that the only way to succeed is to leave this behind. This negativity is hard to mask at the office and even impacts my personal life and relationships because I'm always in a bad mood and I love my work. Wow. So this is actually a very good question. Yeah, and this is good. So one of the things is law firms prefer hiring younger people because older attorneys are often damaged goods and will not enthusiastically throw themselves. It's a great question. I'll tell you why. Into the work, and will be suspicious on the lookout for all negativity, for signs something is wrong. And so this is how it works. So a young attorney that comes into a law firm typically isn't like in this cover you're behind. And so when something bad happens, they feel that they may not anticipate it and they're more impressionable. So they work harder and they want praise and things. As an attorney gets older, you don't see law firms hiring people with 20 years of experience to be 50-year or senior associates. It scares them. But this particular person knows that he's at a firm and is totally permanent after working for. So I don't know if this person's at this firm right now or was at this firm, but law firms can do all sorts of things. They can let everyone go. You never know. And it's very difficult. This negativity is hard to mask at the office. Okay, I would be very careful. Someone that is essentially letting people go like that, all of a sudden, I think is a scary firm for you to be in. That particular thing I would probably let go. I remember in my first legal position, and I was with a judge, and I was in essentially a 2-year clerkship, and it got to the point where he and I were not getting along, basically because of the politics of the way he was operating, which were his right because he was appointed by the president. It doesn't matter, but I just didn't like it, and so I became critical of it. And then suddenly he and I were on the outs, and as we should have been. And instead of a 2-year clerkship, I went to him and discussed it and agreed that it would only be a 1-year clerkship. Had I not done that, I am 99% sure, or 95, that I probably would have been fired because it was just too much. And I was acting like a punk. But the point is, like, when I got into my next job, after having worked as a summer associate in a place where only 2 people got offers, myself and one other girl, I realized you have to work very hard. I realized you have to really be careful about keeping politics under the radar. And another thing the judge did was he really only had 2 conversations with me about the quality of work the few times I was there. One time was about a typo, and the next time was about a typo. So I realized that I had to learn from all this. And so I actually became a better attorney, but I was paranoid. So people are also paranoid in relationships. Like, people will have broken up with them. And so the next person that comes along, if they see signs that something looks weird, rather than feel like someone broke up with them, they broke up with them. So this is what people do. In this particular situation, I would recommend leaving the firm. I would basically say that they let everybody but me go. It's scary. But realize that you weren't let go, and that because you weren't let go, that's actually a very good thing. You're obviously doing very good work, but you got to go in and learn the lessons. And this is actually very valuable. So what did these attorneys do that got let go? So what did these attorneys do? What I did do. And so what I did when I got to a new firm, I realized that never get involved in politics. Never get involved in politics. You just have to completely avoid it. And your relationship with your employer needs to be really good. So my relationship with my employer wasn't good. So what he did, because he didn't like my politics, but I didn't like his, he went and would start looking for typos and things. And that was a way to justify our disagreement and potentially probably fire me. So you fix what you can, but that's it. What most of the time, just so you understand, when people are fired, they're fired for financial reasons, or they're fired because the employer knows they're not on their side anymore. That's it. Once the employer knows they're not on their side, the employer has no problem letting them go. So you need to always try to get a mentor, and as I talked about earlier, and in addition to getting a mentor, form close relationships with people in power. And then if you do that, you're okay. So close relationships means be very available to them, solicitous of work, all that kind of stuff. But any firm that's letting all these people go, keeping you around, obviously likes you, but that's just a really bad sign. One of the things that I've noticed, it was interesting, I was talking about a couple of big firms. I've been having these meetings every morning with our recruiters, and then we were talking about firms, and there was one firm we were talking about that used to be considered like a complete rock star law firm, like Skadden or something, like a really good law firm. But then what they did is they did the unthinkable for a firm of that caliber. They laid a bunch of people off. And all of a sudden, this is back in
First time they did it was like in 2001 or 2001. And the next time they did it was in 2008. And so the entire firm, their reputation suffered like really severely. And now all of a sudden, the best students from Harvard and everything no longer want to go there because it's just institutional memory. Like, you don't hear about firms, they certainly may do it, but
you don't hear about firms like, let me just fix something right here quick with this email. You don't hear about firms like Skadden and a lot of other really good firms laying people off. They just don't, because the reputation is too strong. And the other thing that's very interesting is when law firms typically let people go, let me just give a second. When law firms, even if they let people go, like the best law firms, like one of the things they do is they never say anything negative about them. Like they are very nice about them. So if a law firm has bad things to say about people that are leaving, especially publicly, then that's a bad sign and something that you should be aware of. Okay, so let's see here. Great discussion. Thanks. I have to go now, but I always feel this person's not here. Okay. I think maybe this is just a comment. Oh, sorry. This person's name. Okay. Yeah, this looks like it's going to be a question. Let's see here. Senior associate, I get paid well, and health insurance is very expensive, more than I've seen anywhere by Reddit information or other sites. It provides bad coverage for my family where I live. I need new health insurance. Is this an acceptable reason to go to a different law firm? Or should I try to research health insurance and buy it from some other source? Yeah, so that's a good question. Health insurance is important. I know that for example, one of my daughters was recently in the hospital for 7 days, and the bill was like $120,000. She wasn't injured or didn't have it. And anyway, and then she's back in there again, and it's like another 100,000 for the same thing. So health insurance is very important for a lot of people. In some law firms, this is a good way for them to save money by making the health insurance on you. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't. If you're doing well at your firm, I would not leave because of health insurance. I think it could be an issue of, I don't know, $500 a month or $1,000, but the political capital that you have and the opportunity and the opportunity for advancement is probably more valuable than the health insurance. So that health insurance is a benefit, but the relationships and how close you are to advancement is actually, and having people protect you is more, your point is your career is more valuable than health insurance. And I just want you to understand one thing, and this is important for senior associates and everyone else. But when you're senior, you're being kept around because the firm likes you, or they have big clients they can give work to at your billing rate. And so that's actually pretty important because if you go to another firm, you're not going to have all those long-standing relationships and other people looking out for you. You're going to have to find new people to give you work. So finding new people to give you work is going to be difficult. People to work is difficult, and it could take you years to get to that level and that you are right now. So that's that. The other thing about the moving to a new firm in this Reddit is you need to get away from comparing things. I hate telling stories from going to religious services, but I will tell you one that I heard last week. There's a story about in the Bible, which, again, I'm not trying to take sides here. I don't even know if it was actually it was in the New Testament, but where this landowner goes out and hires a bunch of people in the morning to work and says, I'll pay you this for the day. And they say, okay, that's great. And then he goes out in the afternoon, in the middle of the day at lunch, and he hires more people and he says, I'll pay you this for the day. And so that's great. And then he goes out later in the day, like an hour or two before the sun sets or the end of the day, and says, I'll pay you this for the day. And it was the same amount. And so when the people that were hired in the morning found out that everyone was paid the same as they were, even though they worked later, they were very upset. And then when people in the middle of the day found out, they were very upset. And so everyone was very upset that other people got more for working less. The idea about that is and so there's a bunch of lessons, which I don't even remember, but the idea for that is that you shouldn't be always putting yourself in a position where you're comparing yourself to others. You should just be glad of what you have. You need to start thinking as an owner and not an employee. So what, it's really strange, my email, an owner and not an employee. So what does an owner think? An employee thinks, employees like, what's fair? What are other people getting? What are other people getting? And all that stuff. And then they worry about that. And then they feel mad if not getting what, feel mad if not getting what they want. And so I'll just tell you a quick story. So I used to have an in-house counsel that was recommended to me by another religious person I knew that I spent time with, attending their stuff. And this person had graduated from law school at some sort of ridiculous age, like 19 or something, and I think from Berkeley, and the youngest graduate ever. But but law firms did not want to hire a 19-year-old, despite he was very great in law school. This was a rabbi, and referred him to me, and I hired him. 6 months after hiring him at probably what I could afford, which was, at the time, maybe $80,000 a year or something. I don't remember. But this is, 3 decades ago. All these firms in Silicon Valley started raising their salaries for incoming associates to, I don't know, 120 or 150 or something. And all of a sudden he was mad. And he said, I need to get that amount. I'm upset. But because I'm not getting that amount, I'm going to start leaving every day at 5 and showing up at 10. And so eventually what happened is I was like, wow, this is crazy. If I want to hire, I can hire someone. And eventually I gave him a raise, that amount. But I was like, things slow down. I don't know where this is going to leave you. And sure enough, things slowed down. There was something that happened. And I found a reason to let him go. And I think it was something as simple as having a relationship with someone in our other office. I don't remember. But so this is what happens. If you start trying to get all these things and comparing to others, it's going to hurt you. So you need to concentrate, just like they talk about in the biblical lesson, on what you have and not worry about what others have. And if you do that, that's going to help you. Every law firm you can compare your job to any law firm. There's other law firms that will pay more money. There's other law firms that have more benefits. There's other law firms that have bigger clients. And so if you want to think negatively, then you're going to show it. And you need to concentrate on what's good. And the power of that lesson is just that. And that lesson actually probably is from the Old Testament. I don't remember. But the power of that lesson is that we make ourselves unhappy by comparing ourselves to others and their matching their skills and interests. So you can, if you stay in a law firm, you can do tech work. Of course you can. You can go out and solicit tech-oriented clients. Of course you can. So why wouldn't you be able to do that? So that's how you can keep, and then tech clients are going to will respect your tech background, and you'll be able to bond with them. And so they're more likely to want to use you because you're like them. And also the law firm, you will learn more about technologically oriented work, related work, if you go to rated legal work, in a law firm. The problem, by the way, and so you basically, this is the same thing, you carve out a niche. So maybe the law firm's not going to do it for you, but you need to do it yourself. You need to figure out, how am I going to carve out a niche within this practice area? And then the thing about doing legal work in a law firm is you're always going to be learning, because the law is always going to be changing, and you're always going to be hopefully advancing with more clients and so forth. The law firm actually offers you, in terms of a legal related thing, much more stuff that's more related to that. Now, it doesn't mean you're working for other people, you're expected to do the kind of work that they want. And if you have more than 5 years of experience doing this, then, and you're still, or even 3 or 4, and you can't see yourself doing any longer, then we have a couple options. One would be trying to move to a law firm that represents these type of clients. And the other, of course, is going in-house. But the only thing to understand about going in-house is once you go in-house, you're not going to be able to go to work with a law firm again. You're not going to be able to get clients in the practice here again. You're not going to be able to, your understanding of the law and so forth isn't going to advance, because what happens inside of law firms is people are constantly, the law is changing, you're working with others, you're talking with other attorneys, and you're researching things for clients and being paid to. But if you go into a in-house environment, your job becomes essentially looking at legal issues and then referring them out to outside counsel. That's just what they do. And clients and law firms, in-house counsel will change all the time. They change when there's a new GC. They change when the new GC will come in and gut the legal department, hire his own or her own people. Will change when there's a new CEO. Look at Twitter, for example. Huge company that you would think, or now what's called X, but a huge company that you would think would have a lot of opportunity, a great legal department. Well, I'm sure that, I don't know, but I'm sure that when Musk took it over, he fired a lot of people in the legal department. And those people, what are they supposed to do? So this is just how it works. You have to be very careful about going in-house. And if you're bored, what I would recommend is starting to build out your career in the work you do maybe in a law firm first before you make that move. Because once you make that move, it's generally somewhat of a dead end. I don't like to say that, but it can be very difficult. And once you have business as a partner, or you have a niche, people are giving you clients, that's suddenly power that you can carry with you into your entire career. You talked about finding a partner who has your back. I was in the situation and turned down the partner's offer to join him at a new firm, including the pay raise he offered. This was a very difficult decision and involved me reaching out to another partner at the current firm, trying to turn it down. Even though the partner clearly valued my work, I didn't feel I trusted his work ethic. Staying behind has been stressful. I wonder if I made the right decision. Okay, so work ethic. Come on, let's talk about work ethic. So I don't know what you're concerned about. You're seeing his work ethic. Was he not working hard enough? Was he absent? I don't know. Or was he doing things that were suspect to you, like that didn't seem right? Okay, look at Rudy Giuliani. Just look at any politician, and people are going to almost any politician, and people are going to find things that are wrong with them. Right? Find things that are wrong with them. Or judge. They did something inappropriate at a party when they were 13. Who knows? So wrong and morally suspect. So that's not your issue to get into that. I'm not saying if the person's committing crimes that you shouldn't be alarmed and not want to be part in it. But you have to be very careful about judging people that you're working with. You stay out of their problems. I've worked with attorneys. I remember one attorney that worked for Michael Avenatti that I was working with, who was just committing all these crimes. He's the guy that represented Stormy Daniels and is in prison for threatening Nike or something. The point is that everybody, your job is basically to not worry about most of this stuff. And if you don't trust their work ethic, that's not a reason to not work there, because any place you work is going to have all sorts of problems. Every big law firm has been sued for breaking the law, for their attorneys breaking the law, for doing something bad. This is just how business works. And I'm not saying I approve of it, but you can't find, if you have a mentor, there's no reason to find fault with them because of the fact that no, you follow the person. You don't have to participate in their imbroglio, or however the word is pronounced, but you need to not worry about the point. Okay, sorry, I'm going to some of the earlier questions now. There's a lot. I really do appreciate these questions today. Generally, I don't know what it is, but a lot of times people ask very short questions. Today, people are asking very long questions, which I like. So thank you. I'm a new associate. I like my bosses, but it's pretty infuriating being micromanaged and having to listen to superiors to screw up a case. I play all these sorts of manipulative games to try to push them in the right direction. When I see we're headed off the rails, and I'm almost always right, I will present things to them so it makes them feel like they came up with it and I missed it, or mention it in passing and pretend to know what it means, etc. And they will come around. I just care about the work and want just all to look good and win these cases, but I don't want to undermine anyone. Is my thinking off? What should I change about my perspective? Okay, this is a good question. Your job as an associate, and this is just how it works anywhere, associate, is to make your superiors feel good about themselves and valued. So regardless of the mistakes they might be making, you follow them and make them feel good about themselves and make them like you. Huge mistake. If you knew more and better, than partners, you would be a partner. So why would you, and I've seen this all the time, by the way. I've seen associates come into firms and be like, oh, this attorney who's recognized as one of the top attorneys in the United States is wrong, and I'm going to be right, and I know what's right. But no, your job is to make people feel good about themselves. So I'll just tell you like what I do at BCG. If a candidate comes in and I see 15 things wrong with their resume and things that they can improve, I don't call them up and say, hey, your resume is a freaking mess. I appreciate you planning to work with us, but wow, you're just doing all this and this and this wrong. If I do that, they're not going to like me and they're not going to want to use our services. And no resume is perfect. And so what I do instead is I call up and I say all the great things I like about their resume. I tell them what they're doing that's great. I point out the positive things. And if I leave a voicemail, they'll call me back. If I don't do that, and I just start criticizing them, they're going to be like, hell, I don't want anything to do with you. And they're going to run away. If I did that with a law firm and I said, no one's going to go work there with the salaries you're paying and with this bad reputation you have in the market, what do you expect me to do? If I do that, no law firm's going to use my services. So you have to think like a business person and think if you want to get business or if you want to stay in a law firm, you need to blow people up and make them feel good. I've seen so many careers ruined by exactly what you're talking about. I had one candidate that went to a top 3 ranked law school, was at the very top of his class, was 6 months into his law firm job as a litigator at a major US law firm, like very prestigious, did exactly what you're talking about. He had a partner that was a junior partner that was handling the matter and doing something. And he said, this is costing too much money. You can go in and do it this way and save a lot of money. And he did. He went in and told the partner that, and he was fired. And then not only that was he fired, but he had this very serious depression that he suffered earlier in his life or something, and it was reactivated. He went into this huge funk and ended up starting his own practice, doing something you would never imagine someone with his background doing, and has been doing it for the past 10 years. You have to be careful. This can screw you up. So how do you make people do the right thing? You write a memo and you say, these are the options, what I think, but you maybe lead them to a conclusion, but you don't make them make the conclusion. So people hate it when you tell them something because they don't feel ownership in it. People love it when they feel like they reach that conclusion based on your conversation with them. And that's really how things are done to move things forward. So that's what you should be doing. And other thing that I hate to say, but I'm going to say it, is many times, and this is just how it works. I was talking to a partner the other day that, the same one I talked about earlier, that had all these mid-sized clients, and he went to a big New York law firm. This is a guy I was talking to in Seattle, but he wasn't in Seattle. He went to a big New York law firm, and suddenly the bills to his clients increased by 3 times. And his clients were like, what the hell's going on? And so then he did this for about a year, and some of his clients were jumping fish and jumping ship. And he went to a mid-sized, like Midwestern firm, or large Midwestern firm. And now everyone's happy. And I said, what is the difference, between the 2 firms? And he said, you know how these New York firms are. Like, they will find every way to bill and run up the expense for every transaction and so forth. So his point was that sometimes firms will just jack up the bills. This is a lot of what's going on in litigation and things like that. So how does that work? I'll tell you, I have more than enough examples. But early in my career, I had this case where it was the very beginning of the case, and we would win it we would be very close to winning it if we did a really good job on the certain motion that was coming in very early in the case. So I wrote this great motion, and the partner that I was working for went in to argue the motion and turned it in, and I thought turned it in, but actually this is incredible, took out some of the better arguments in the motion, turned it in, and then made a very weak argument to defend us and then lost a motion he should have won. And the only reason for that was because they wanted to keep the case going and the bills going. This is not an ethical thing to do, but this happens in law firms. They want to keep billing, and it's just how they are. And I'm not saying they're all like that. I'm not even saying that 25% of them are like that, but a lot of them are like that. And partners, a lot of times when they bring in business, that's how they're compensated. So they might want to overwork cases and things. And you may see that. And they may not make the arguments they should be making because they want to keep things going. That's not your concern. And I'm just saying, that's not your concern. You can't worry about that. That's the way it is. And it's never going to change. I don't like it any more than you do, but you have to learn how that game's played. And then maybe when you're in a position later on where you have a business and you realize that your compensation is dependent on how much you bill on different matters, you will think much differently about this, because a lot of times if they're doing that, it's from a position of being scared. And I realize how bad this sounds. It's actually pretty scary, but that's how it works. How great these questions are today. These are just very, very good questions. And I think it's going to help a lot of people that are on the call. And everyone's asking really good questions. Thank you. These are, by the way, these are some of the best questions I've heard in the webinar. I'm a new associate that's interviewing with other firms in my area. I'm at risk of being outed or getting bad reputation. I think this is obviously pretty crazy and unfair, but I do worry that people might gossip, not that I'm important. Okay, so general rule is no, law firms will never talk to other law firms, and I'll give you some exceptions to that in a minute, other law firms about people interviewing. So they just don't. When you use a recruiting firm, I'm not trying to sell you a recruiting firm by any stretch of the imagination, but a recruiting firm, this hardly ever happens, because if you do this, if a law firm does this, then the recruiter will stop sending people. And so there's nothing, and then not only will the recruiter stop sending them people, but the recruiter will talk negatively about them. So that's one of the reasons, by the way, that people use recruiters. I'm not trying to sell you recruiters. That's not the purpose of this call. But so law firms rarely do this. But there's a couple situations where you need to be careful. So you need to be careful in small markets. So in small markets, meaning you might be, and I don't know what a small market would be, but let's say someplace in Wisconsin, that's one of the cities there. Let's say not Detroit, but let's say some other suburb like Lansing or something, maybe not even Lansing. But in smaller markets, you need to be careful because some of the attorneys like there will talk. It's just they're not, the ethics of large firms and mid-sized firms and even smaller firms in big cities are basically, no, there's no way we do this. Like they just don't, because if they do that, it's just going to prevent them from getting more applications and all sorts of things. But smaller markets are a little different. Sometimes people aren't as, are competitive with these other little small firms, and there's just not a lot of opportunity there. So sometimes they will say things, you have to be careful. The only other thing that I would recommend in any market is if you interview with a firm that is obviously not as good as the one you're at, is where you're at, and the attorneys there are insecure, then this could be a problem. So this actually happened to me on one occasion. So I'll tell you what happened. So I was at my first firm, Quinn Emanuel, which was back then, it still is, but back then it was pretty extraordinary. It had everyone that was there was either someone from Cravath or had gone to Harvard and been at the top of their class, or Stanford, same thing. So it was a much smaller firm of 50 attorneys, but it just had an incredible reputation. It still does. But even then, back then, it was just like, these people are just amazing. And so I had a friend that had gone to my same high school, and he was working at a firm that was in entertainment, that had an entertainment practice where people were working on movies and driving around in convertibles and stuff. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. And he's like, yeah, you should interview here. Like, it would be so cool. And I guess he had and I thought about it. He just kept calling me and talking to me about it. And he was going to get a commission if I went to work there. So I went to interview at this firm, and the attorneys were not anywhere close to as qualified as I was, and in terms of their pedigrees and stuff. And anyway, and it was just very uncomfortable. They're like acting like a big deal. And I'm like, why are these people being, and anyway, so it was a smaller firm, a less prestigious firm that was competitive. with others, but never could get the same kind of work. And it did get back to my firm, and I found out about it, not because they said anything, but because I could tell. And just a lot of little things happened. I wasn't being paranoid. Partner that I was friends with at one point let it drop like months later. So you just need to be careful. It's very difficult to send out applications many times and trust people. They're not going to say they got an application from you and talk about it, but they often will say something. And so you need to be very careful. In smaller markets where you can't trust attorneys and where there's just firms are very competitive, or if you interview with a place very far beneath you that wants to undermine the better firm, those are the exceptions. And I really hate to say anything because it's so rare that it happens, but I have seen it happen. It happened to me in my entire history of representing tens of thousands of attorneys at BCG. It's only happened once, and it happened very early in my career, like when I've been about 6 months into it. And I was submitting a candidate to a bunch of firms around LA in his practice area. And then about a week after I submitted him, an attorney from his firm called me, the one that had been working at. And I thought he was still there, but he'd been fired. And he'd been fired for doing something unethical, like that they thought was horrible. And he was very close to making partner, like weeks away. And he did something that they were very upset about. And other firms knew about it. So when I submitted him to another firm, saying nothing about this very unethical thing he did, that other firm called his other firm, the firm that he'd been at. It was like, this guy's going around saying this. And so that was pretty scary. So that's the only time I've seen that happen, where essentially someone did something that they thought was almost criminal, and other firms knew about it. I didn't know about it. And then when I sent him out, these firms were like, you can't, this is what's happening. So that's the only time I've ever seen it happen. And that, again, is having represented tens of thousands of candidates. No candidate's ever said. And that's basically because most law firms will really respect that, because they're not going to be able to get applications from other people about that. And no one's going to gossip. No one says anything when they get an application from another firm. It's crazy. They wouldn't do it because it's just not how it works. In Los Angeles, probably every attorney at a big firm has applied to Latham or something at one point or another. Everybody wants to work at a firm like Latham or Skadden or something. So no, Skadden doesn't go around saying, hey, this person from your firm applied. Most firms don't care, even smaller firms. They're just like, they get applications and there's nothing against people that are applying. And it's just not happening. So, sure. Okay, what strategies can I employ to stay motivated, engaged with my work while resisting the temptation to look for a new job? Yeah, so what strategies? The idea is you visualize what's going to happen if you do well. You visualize and you think about what the future holds. You look at the lives that partners in your firm are living. Maybe you look their houses up on Zillow, I don't know, or what's it? You see what they're doing. You think if that's what you want. You realize that the longer you do it, you're going to learn more and your life's going to change in a positive way. You look at the positive things that have happened to people that stick around, and then you continue to learn, and then you also carve out a niche. You think in terms of what your life is going to look like if you give it your all. So what is your life going to look like? And it can be great. Everything that you do, you have to put in the price when you're young. There's kind of two ways to success. There's the easy way to success, and easy is very hard in the long run. And then there's the hard way. I don't know what the statement is, but it's something like that. And then hard is easy in the long run. So what does that mean? So a lot of people will dabble. And so dabbling means you'll try something, you get bored of it, and will quit. So what happens to anything is when you start something and you're new at it, you'll go up like this. And then the more time goes by, the less your improvement will be, but you'll keep improving. And so if you want to be a really good tennis player, you can't just walk in and be a good tennis player. You have to start, and then you have to get good at it, better and better and better and better. And so that's just how it works. If you're going to be an attorney in a big firm, or in a small firm or anything, you have to commit to it and not get distracted. So what does distraction mean? So I'm sure when I was in high school, people dropped out. So they're done. And that's what you came up against. So people dropped out. People drop out of college. People drop out in college. And then the same thing with law school. And then they drop out of law firms. Why don't you think about the fact that you did all this work in college and then maybe in high school, and why are you going to drop out when you get exactly where you should be? That doesn't make any sense. So you don't, after spending high school, college, law school, and then getting a job in a law firm, like, why would you decide to drop out? Would you drop out of law school because the classes are hard? Would you drop out of college because you've got to spend all-nighters writing papers or programming? It's crazy. So no, you don't drop out. You realize that the temptation is to look at other things. I was reading, and this is funny, but auto workers, I guess, people that don't even need a high school education, some of them can make a great deal of money working in an assembly line, like a couple $100,000 a year. It's just absolutely amazing. That was just reading an article about a strike this week. But the idea is that a lot of times people will drop out of high school and they'll take these jobs and they'll think, wow, I'm making all this money and I can afford a car. And then they'll do the same thing with college. Like they'll drop out and think, wow, this is great. Now I can, and then they'll drop out of law school. So people stop at different points. And so I just don't understand why you would stop or look for a new job because things are a little tough. I just think you need to look for the positive of where you're at. Now, there's nothing wrong with moving to a much better firm or a place where you're going to get more opportunity, or you're going to have potentially a longer career. That's very smart. So I don't think, I wouldn't say, that I wouldn't look into that. There's nothing wrong with leaving sometimes, but you just need to be careful. And you don't want to basically drop out of something or your firm because things are getting a little hard. This is easy. Like most people do this. This is a little bit harder. This is much harder. And this is harder still. But you don't want to reach the point where this is too much for you. So I was reading something, and I shouldn't even talk about this, but where they were saying sometimes people are promoted beyond their competency level. And they were talking about why our current vice president, and I'm not going to name names, but was not going to be partner because I'm not partner, but president, because in vice presidency, she's beyond her competency level. Now I'm going to argue one way or another about that, but I thought that point was interesting, that sometimes people are promoted and get to positions beyond their competency level. It happens in law firms all the time. There's people that join law firms that aren't competent and they leave and they should never have been there in the first place. But you just have to remember that you always want to be going beyond your competency level or doing the best you can. My branch office has inconsistent work. My firm national has a ton of work that I've been consistently tapping into. For example, I was put in a huge trial in another state with a partner who thinks highly of me and chose me out of maybe a dozen associates to work with. I always call and say hello to other offices and email them to stay in touch. Is this a reliable method, or should I be worried about staying in a branch office? We'll move into another branch office of a more. Yeah, branch offices are dangerous. So I remember it was funny. I was interviewing with a law firm when I came out from Los Angeles, and I was interviewing with them, and then I was talking to the hiring partner. He said, "Where else are you interviewing?" And I told them some other firms. I was talking to Latham and the firm called Heller Ehrman, and just some other good firms around LA. And he goes, but Heller Ehrman, which is a San Francisco firm, had all these really highly qualified people in it. He goes, be careful of branch offices. And the reason you need to be careful of branch offices is because the power and the work is always in the main office. Sometimes law firms will open branch offices just because they feel like they need to have all these different offices to look powerful and to have reach to service different clients. But in reality, everything is run out of the main offices. I was at a firm called Dewey Valentine, and they had such little respect for their Los Angeles office that they would actually bring in to work on their matters people from other LA law firms instead of referring work to their own office. Branch office can be very dangerous. It can be very difficult to make partners sometimes, or it can be easier. So sometimes, because they want to set an example that there's opportunity there, they will make people partner that may not have been able to be a partner in the main office. So there's opportunity, but generally it's much more difficult. And branch offices also, it can be difficult to get work because you don't have the relationships with people in the main office. I know of people that they're trying to make partner, and the law firm will actually tell them, you need to spend 1 week a month here in our main office to forge these relationships and things. So you have to be very careful about branch offices. You want to make sure that many times that the work that's coming into a branch office is that a lot of it is generated locally by partners there. Sometimes a branch office is just like a straw man. There's hardly any people generating their own business there. And if that's the case, you need to be very careful. There's a lot of great questions. It's amazing. Yeah, let's see. Okay, what are some indicators that suggest I should stick it out at my current law firm, even when I feel overwhelmed by the workload and the atmosphere isn't the most uplifting? Okay, so the indicators are you're learning, there's opportunity, you're being given a lot of work, you have good relationships, partners seem to like you, you seem to be treated, given better work and opportunities than other associates. Those are some of the things. The other would be people are making partner and advancing. The work is increasing. All this sort of stuff. So the biggest thing about working in a law firm or anywhere is that you need to realize that getting work is like a privilege. Work is a good thing. Work means there's opportunity. Work means the firm's doing something right. Work means they're getting repeat business. Like all of these positive things. And no, you can't expect the law firm to be uplifting. Being in the Army or in war is not uplifting. None of this stuff is where you can make a lot of money is going to be uplifting. Just realizing that is something. Now, if you're getting very negative feedback, when people seem unhappy, if people, when they leave, good stuff doesn't happen. So this is another thing. When you leave, good stuff doesn't happen. So what's interesting to me is a lot of people come and become recruiters, for example, in this recruiting firm, and they had no experience before, and at times it's been a very high pressure environment where people are exposed to a lot of different types of thinking and stuff. And the people that do well there and are that when they leave, they become very successful. And so the idea would be, what happens to people that leave after doing this? Do they become successful, or are they having problems? And so you need to see what's happened to other people in my position. So that should be a sign. What has happened to others in my position? If good things have happened to them, then that should tell you that there's something good about that environment, and it's keeping people into good people. So those are some indicators, like why it could be smart. But if others in your position are having problems when they leave, then that's not good either. So this is so many great questions, just amazing. Again, these are like the longest questions I've ever seen in one of these webinars in the years I've been doing it. I have been working with certain partners who are, been very appreciative and mentoring to me, but are also a bit unstable, tend to make mistakes, and will get weird about sharing work and billing me hours from their assignments. It is hard to know where I stand with people who are very up and down, which also adds to my stress. Are these problems normal? And how should I adjust? How can I know if I'm at risk and need to find a new job? I've not been here long, and it may be hard to find a new job, but I'm in a demand area. Where you recommend? Okay, so this is called codependency, and okay, it's not complete codependency. Codependency is making others control how you feel. So what does that mean? That means if others are having problems or others are not, and if others are stressed, and then you pick up on that. So you need to develop, and it's not easy, but you need to develop a center, and meaning where others' problems where others do not affect you. And that's difficult, but that's something that you can get out of therapy. It's something you can get out of just understanding what this is, but you need to use this where others do not affect you in terms of your mood. So people are going to come in and be depressed, they're going to be stressed. So you need to understand how to deal with that. But that all these things are a problem. And also you're saying partners tend to make mistakes. Yes, of course they do. This is just how it works. And that's okay. But again, as I said earlier, your job's not to point all that out. You just need to live with it. And sharing work and billing hours in their assignments is just a sign that their clients are unwilling to pay. So that's actually something that's useful to know. And then these are normal problems. What I'm a little bit concerned about here is if the partners are unwilling to give you work, that means that their clients are unwilling to pay. So if their clients are unwilling to pay, then this is an important thing to understand. That means that there's not a lot of work there and they have to keep the cost down. That's something I very much recommend keeping top of mind and thinking about that, because if that's happening, then you may have a hard time in the future because the firm may not have the work. So if you are in an in-demand area and you feel you can go someplace with a lot of work, which you need in order to survive, then yeah, I think you might want to look at for a new job. So everything you're saying actually is a reason to look for a new job, because work is like air. If a law firm runs out of work, it runs out of air, and means you're going to be gone. And you will be gone because they need the air for themselves. So that's actually everything about this webinar was really about why you should stay. But if there's no work and they're not able to show work, then that's a problem. And that's a good question. So this is a sign of you want to go to a firm. If you're at a big firm, a lot of big firms, like they will have so much work that you just can't even keep up. That's actually a good sign. It's nothing really to worry about. Because that means that there's opportunity. How seriously should I take a partner not liking me? I'm at a branch office with not a lot of options of partners to work with, but a large network nationally. I've been extremely busy and I'm tracked to be one of the most associate firms since joining earlier in the year. However, this younger salary partner has been upset with me over me catching a mistake of his months ago. Yeah, this is just a recurring issue. Like all these associates and people here are saying they've caught mistakes and the people are mad at them. So what does that say? It says you need to be very careful about this, which he made more of an issue than me and has gone out of his way, I suspect, to badmouth me to others. So it's very common. This is just a big problem. Like you have to be very careful about pointing out mistakes or how you do it and doing it in a way where you're not acting like you're superior to the partner and everything. So I spoke to other partners and learned he has a reputation, clearly hasn't been fired. I'm close with influential power. Should I move? No, you're fine. So you're absolutely fine. He's an income partner because of something the sense of power of people that don't have power. So people that do not have power typically will exert power on people they can't. Power will exert power over people that they can't. So all that means is that that's a sign of fear, weakness, and all sorts of stuff. So I would not worry about this junior partner. If you're close to people that have the power and the work, that's exactly what you should be doing. There's always going to be, in law firms, by the way, there could be one faction of 20 attorneys against another faction of 20 attorneys that hate each other. There's most associates, there's problems with one partner or associate or another. These are not things that you really should worry about too much. Just a lot of great questions there. This is just fantastic. Sorry. I'm honestly astonished at how in-depth these questions are today. I'm working in a specialized and very busy litigation practice area for a big firm. I'm in a branch office in the Midwest. I'm very busy, but I've had a lot of doubts and paranoia. A well-known toxic younger salary partner. Same thing has happened up here, right? Same thing. Interesting. These are young partners with issues. Okay. A well-known salary partner does not like me based on something minor and has gone out of his way to make me miserable. There are times when partners will start being protective about work, especially the ones I'm closest with. And my only option to stay busy is to work with other offices. That's okay. This has been a good source of work, but is inconsistent. Another firm with a bigger name wants to interview me for another branch office. I've only been here a few months. Would moving or trying to move be a mistake? What would justify, not justify? Okay, so many times what happens, and I'm not going to talk about this in one way or another, but people will
I was working with a guy once that had been at a huge firm. I don't know which one. It was something massive, like in New York. And he'd left that firm and gone to another firm for 2 or 3 months, and then gone to another firm. And then he'd been at that firm 10 years. And he said to me, should I list this on my resume that I was at this firm for 3 months? And I said, it's up to you, but I don't know. Or I actually, he'd done something. He'd actually gotten the job with this kind of phony resume. He said, should I tell him about it? And I'm like, I don't know that in the course of a 15-year career that really matters very much.
I think so. If you're at a firm for only a few months and you can go to a better firm than with a lot of work, then that's probably pretty good. The point is that we keep coming back to this. So younger partners, people without power, which are partners without business many times, that are income partners, are often, they feel like they're scared, so they will take that out sometimes on others. But not only that, but they can be difficult. So this is a salary partner here. This is the same thing here. And that there's the lots of doubts, a younger toxic partner doesn't like the person. Same thing that happened up there. So what does that tell you? That tells you that you really want to avoid people. You want to try to, and this is just a piece of advice for everyone. You're better off getting work and working for people that have business than people that don't. So the people that have business have power to give you more work and all sorts of things. The people that don't have business will often can make life hell for you. So you just need to be very careful. I don't like the idea that you have to stay busy with other offices. So I personally, even though look at this, everything I talk about is staying in that firm, I think you should go interview at the other firm and say, how much do you have a lot of work? What kind of stuff are you doing? And would it be easy? Who could I work for? Ask all those questions. There's nothing wrong with interviewing with them. And I don't think you have to worry though about a toxic partner. I think that's like the least of your worries. I think what you should be worrying about is, let me just see here. You should be worrying about, you should be worrying about something else. You need to worry about the thing I kept saying earlier. It's just that work is like air. We need to move many times. If there's no air, there is no air. You need to get out. So that would be a big piece of advice. Run, or you can get out, something like that. Okay, I've gotten reviews from certain types of partners who are very pedantic over hours as a first-year associate. Okay, I will be assigned a huge motion, dismiss summary judgment, a research issue, and want to do it perfectly and error-free. I've been told my work is excellent. However, these partners complain about too many hours in the work, even though I was never given guidance on the hours. In some cases, the partner boasted about the work to the client without any changes while simultaneously complaining. Okay, including to other partners about hours spent on it. Sometimes this feels very unreasonable. If I'm not playing games with my hours and it's honestly recording my time spent, how should I respond to this? This is I need to leave. I still very much trained on not how to level work. Okay, so this is a good point. Yeah, so most law firms want you to work a lot of hours, and they have clients that are willing to pay. So if the clients aren't willing to pay for your hours, then that's an issue. Like most law firms want you to bill as many hours as possible, meaning work as much as you can so they can bill the firms. And now they're telling you not to work a lot of hours. So law firms that are telling you not to work a lot of hours, all that means is their clients aren't willing to pay for you for that. And that means their clients are maybe not the largest clients that are very budget conscious. So that's a problem if you want to do high level work. So if you bill a lot of hours to an issue, what that means is that you have the ability to look very in depth things. That means you can look at issues and actually become a better attorney. And I'll just go over this with you real briefly because I cover this every week, but I'll talk about it right now. So you can have different prestige levels of firms or firms that, and I've developed a system just because I've been doing this for so long, but firms that are ranked from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So a 5 firm is like clients will spend anything. They don't care. They just want you to do as much work as possible. And then you get firms that are this. So this is like your AmLaw 100 to 200. And this is like your top of the whatever, Wachtell bath, all that stuff. Clients do not care. They'll pay whatever. They don't care. And there's some cost sensitive. Then you get your kind of mid-sized firms that are more like this, but the bill size and this basically means, and this means just cost no object. Don't care. It's just whatever. They don't care. This is some cost sensitivity, depending on, but still can look at issues. And then this is some cost sensitivity. It means the lower billing rates, and need to contain costs. And then these are all businesses. They're working for businesses. So these are small to mid-sized. And then these are going to be mid-sized public companies. And then these are going to be, and then when you get down to twos, these tend to be mainly individuals, some companies, and everyone's cost sensitive. And this could be, I'm not saying in a negative way, this could be, insurance defense is basically representing individuals, that, and then et cetera. And then these are your most cost sensitive, be representing only individuals with limited budgets, like I'll do this for $500 and that sort of thing. So representing only individuals. So this is important to understand. So when you're saying your firm is cost sensitive, the higher you go in terms of these rankings or the money, the better off you will, the more the clients will be willing to pay. Also, the more clients are willing to pay for the work the more they're willing to pay, the more you're going to learn and the better attorney you will be. So you can certainly stay down at this level representing only individuals or working for mid-sized firms, but the more you do that, the more the hours are going to be controlled. Now, when you go to work for these AmLaw 100 and these big firms, they don't care. They want you to bill as many hours as possible. And in the process of doing that, you will actually become a better attorney that looks at things in a lot more depth. When these attorneys go up against these attorneys, typically kick the crap out of them. When these attorneys, AmLaw 100, 200 go up against people from smaller firms, they often win. It's just how things happen. You need to be very careful about this. There's so many great questions. Honestly, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've just never seen such in-depth questions. It's very interesting, this audience today. Partner in my small office of a large firm that is very negative about the pay, management, bonuses, rates, and says in front of summer associates, I start off in a good relationship with this person, but they quickly soured over something minor. I feel this person is now saying negative things about other partners, but I know that some of the managing partners like him or listen to him. Working with him could even be a bad thing for them. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this. This is another really freaking good question, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I want to avoid ever working with this person in the future and manage to nicely extricate myself from a particular project. What do you recommend as far as avoiding toxic partners? Okay, so every question is almost we've been asked is about working with partners with no business. And again, I'm not saying this in a negative way. I don't want to offend anybody. But most of the time, when there's a partner that's in charge of summer associates, or there's a partner that is the mentor to all the new associates, and again, I'm not being critical here, but most of the time, these are partners without their own business that are given a role because the partners with business don't want to do it. They're too profitable. So the firm decides it makes sense to put someone on associate to help with summers or to mentor first years. This is what happens to partners without a lot of business. So every question that's been asked today, almost a lot of the questions are people having problems working with people without business, which are toxic partners that don't have business, that are income partners. So what does that tell you? It tells you that those people are likely to give you a really hard time because they probably feel that way because of their position. And if someone is really negative about the firm, like those are people that you avoid. You don't want to have anything to do with them. Even other associates, like just don't
play that toxicity. What does that do? What does it do when someone's saying negative things? So you avoid people. You basically, I don't know, but you have losers and then you have winners. And you're obviously going to be better off if you spend your time with winners. And so if you spend time with winners, and it's done. That's it. You need to spend time with winners, and winners will draw you up, winners will pick you up, and losers will drag you down. It's simple as that. And that's what you need to do, is you need to do that. And you need to do whatever you can to try to stay with winners as opposed to losers. You should not be spending time with people that are negative, with people that are going to find fault with your firm, with people that are, no, it's just not good. Avoid it. Okay. And then anybody, you try to work with people that are succeeding, with people that are succeeding. Okay. Great presentation. I've been a construction litigation attorney for 6 years. The first 5 was a small firm, last with a mid-sized firm. My current firm likes me. I average, 2,250 or greater hours per year. And I believe I can become a partner here the next year at most, too. However, the firm also has a number of issues. The pay is not competitive. The support is lacking, high turnover ratio. And since the department does insurance defense, our clients are adjusters at insurance companies. I'm concerned that if I stay, as I transition to partner, my book of business will be limited to insurance companies. I think my best option is go to an AmLaw 200 firm that will make a better platform to establish company clients and thus not be limited to insurance defense. Also, I presume the support and pay will be much higher. The only downside is it will take longer to make partner if I move. So you're better off, I think. So first of all, what I like about this particular resume or person is you're talking about construction, litigation, which is a great field to be in. There's a lot of work. And that's great. It's a specialty, like everything I was talking about earlier. So this is very smart, being in construction litigation. Now, doing insurance defense means your clients are budget conscious, and that's obviously a concern. Your clients are budget conscious, and you can't do as much. You cannot work in as much depth. And what that means, I'm not trying to be rude here, is that you're probably not as good of an attorney at this point just because you're trained in your limitations of what you can do as someone that would be an AmLaw 100 or Law 2 firm. What's nice is if you feel like you can get business from insurance companies and develop a niche there, then that's very good. I met someone the other day that developed this kind of niche and became very successful. They figured out how to grow it into something big. So if you want to do more high profile work in construction litigation, then yes, you should move to a bigger firm. It will make you probably a better attorney. But the downside is that if you're in a position now where you feel like you can develop business from insurance companies, you understand it, that may be a smart long-term move. But if you go to an AmLaw 100 law firm and it becomes the billing rates are going to be higher, it's going to be more difficult to get clients. And so that may be a good idea or it may not. I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what you should do. But what I would say is I think that you can still build a very good career if you know how to get those types of clients. Because if you understand how to get insurance company clients and you can develop a big book of business doing that, then that puts you much better off than if you're an AmLaw 100 or 200 law firm. One of the reasons sometimes moving to a bigger firm is not smart is because it may be more difficult to develop clients. And if the work in construction litigation, which I believe it is, tends to be lower billable hours and things. The largest law firms don't want to do that work. And these law firms end up sending work to other places. So it's just something to understand. Not to other places. The largest law firms don't like to keep those practice areas around. So what is an example of that? Like labor and employment used to be a practice area that was very popular inside of law firms of all sizes. But the problem with labor and employment work is that because it's so routine, a lot of law firms decided that it wasn't smart for them clients. There's a lot of downward pressure on billing rates. And because there's downward pressure on billing rates, the clients don't want to pay for expensive attorneys to do that work. And so they basically they'll demand that the large law firms take less pay or less higher billable rates. And then the law firms eventually are like, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore. And they end up giving the work to they end up basically shutting down their labor and employment practices. So
That's what I would be a little bit concerned about. And in terms of your career, is if you join a large law firm, are they even going to keep the practice area? But also, more importantly, you will learn a lot. That's a lot to give you in terms of an answer, but those are things to think about. Just amazing questions. You've often talked about being wary of working for people who keep work to themselves and do not share it. I'm at a large firm in New York. How close do I need to monitor this? I'm an associate who receives a lot of work from a single partner. This person is generally very helpful and has given me a lot of work and also feedback. Some very critical and some very good. I worry when they start giving work to other associates. I worry when they start giving work to other associates, or I'm not in the loop with something. I'm overthinking this. Yes, you're overthinking it. I think that's good. This all goes back to codependency. So codependency means I base how I feel about myself on others, on what others are doing. It keeps coming up. It's okay. But what I would recommend is you need to diversify. You need to diversify who you're working for. Most businesses are diversified. They have multiple locations, they have multiple products, they diversify. And so if one thing goes bad, then there are even law firms. They have corporate, litigation, real estate, they're diversified. So you need to diversify who you are working for, and meaning working for other people. Because the problem is if you're working for one partner and that partner leaves, or you get in some spat with them, which you just can't control, then you're in trouble. I had an instance where I knew a woman, and she was working only for a very important client in this firm in the Bay Area, a very important partner, and the only partner in that firm that was doing work in this practice area and working directly for it. And she used to go in to work every day, and this partner would talk about her dating, her sex life, her lack of a sex life, like all this stuff with her. And this woman would sit there and listen to it. And then one day, this woman went into the office and had some fling that weekend and talked to her about this fling. And all of a sudden, this partner just started hating her. I don't know why, because she talked about it, and stopped giving her work and let her go. So the point is, and then this person, because they were in such a niche practice area, there were no jobs for them in all of California, and went into a different profession entirely. So you have to be very careful about working with one partner, because if something goes bad with that partner, so you need to diversify your work and try to impress as many people as possible. And so that's the problem and the issue with what's going on with you right now. So let me just see. I just can't believe how many questions are. Wow, good questions. I work for Tiny Doom Law Firm. Our biggest clients seem to be interested in talking to me along without the owner. How do I sit in the client that I'm willing to jump ship and go in house with them instead? I realize this is a nuclear option. Well, you need to listen to the client and tell the client the first thing you do when the client talks to you, and this is what you need to do. When the client talks to you, you need to basically say, I'm happy, I'm loyal, and then listen. And then don't say anything. Just go back and say, I'm happy, I'm loyal, all these sorts of things when a client does that. Now, why do I say that? I say that because you don't know what's going on. Is the client trying to recruit you? Is the client testing you for the owner? You don't know. You have no idea. So you need to go in and tell the client, when the client, you say, sure, I'm happy to talk to you. But when the client talks to you, this is what you need to say. And you need to walk away from that conversation having said that. Because otherwise, it could be a nuclear option. Suddenly, the partner, whoever, the owner of the firm, hates you and no longer fires you. So you need to be very careful. So when you go to the client, you say, I'm happy, I'm loyal, listen. First listen and see what they want. And then basically, then you respond, I'm happy, I'm loyal, say some great things about the owner. And then get a sense if the person's serious or not. And then sense if the person's serious. And if the person is serious, then you contact them later. But then you go back to work and you can get a sense if this was a test or not. So if suddenly this partner, owner of the firm, is just very nice to you and solicitous, then you know that it was a test, or that the company said something to them. So it's a very good question. You need to be very careful about how you do that, because sometimes You just don't know. So that's the answer. Every time sometimes I'll talk to partners in these huge law firms, and I'll call them and leave them a message or something, and they'll call me back. And they always say, the ones that call me back, I'm very happy at my firm. They're doing great things, blah, blah, blah. But the ones that call you back, that they have interest in you and you don't know why. But even though they say that, they're testing you out, they're calling you back. So they always say that. So that's the same way you need to act. And then you need to see how serious is a person. And then once you realize that, then you can come there. I joined a 200 plus attorney firm in November 2022. I graduated from law school in 2014. Okay. But very bluntly stated in my interview that having worked at a very small firms only, my skill level should not be considered that of a ninth. Now, very interesting. Ninth year relatively to that of a ninth year, and that relatively larger firm I should be treated as a junior associate. Whoa, and that's not good. Okay, so wait a minute. They appreciated this, that described a mentoring program and hired me. Then a couple of months, work pretty much dried up. I did make some errors, proofreading type issues, and one or two misunderstandings and revisions. I had very little to do since March, April, despite numerous conversations to insist it's simply a matter of workflow. However, I was quietly taken off a case, besides the client having stated directly that the work I'd submitted was very good. In a 6-month review, I was told much work would come my way, but 3 months later it's not come. Adversity, nothing to develop. So you should leave. That's it. So you should leave because first of all, there's not the work, but the problem is it's great that you got the job, but if partners aren't giving you work, it's because they think that they don't want to, because of however your work was perceived early on. So that's just that. Many times when you're coming out of a small firm where a certain quality of work is not expected, if you go into a larger firm and don't know how to do things in the way that they do, which is proofreading, making sure your arguments are really good, making sure everything's really tight. It's just something you learn when you're at big firms, and at small firms you don't. And the thing is, you can learn from this experience and go to another firm, but if there's no work, they're basically, what they're saying is, we're not going to fire you. We're not, because we don't want to get sued or whatever. We're not going to fire you, but we're not going to give you anything to do. And that should be a sign that there's nothing to do. And if our partners don't feel confident giving you work, so that's what's going on. So there's no reason that you should, in my opinion, there's no reason at this point to stay around, because if there's no work, how are you going to advance? If you made some mistakes and you're blacklisted, then that's a sign too. So they're just saying that you should take off. And so that's the message. Now, if suddenly a bunch of work shows up, then maybe that's different. But I would say, the next time you do work, learn to very carefully review it and everything. And it doesn't matter what the client says. It matters what the firm says about your work. Very important question. The thing is if the big thing that we've talked about this in every question, everything that people ask today, work is oxygen. So if you're not getting work, then if there's not enough oxygen, you need to leave, right? Because the partners are going to get rid of you first, regardless of why you're not getting work. You need to leave. So if it goes on, it's just, there's nothing positive about this. And they probably don't think your work is up to their standards because of the way you're trained. And things that were acceptable at a smaller firm are not acceptable at a larger firm. So it's just the level of detail and things. It's not something that you would be expected to know, but you may have picked up some bad habits and need to fix them. So I just would, if it was me, I probably would strongly consider leaving. If you do stay, then making sure you improve your work. So this is the rule that I learned, and it took me a couple of years to learn it. If it takes you one day, or even takes you 2 hours to write a letter, it should take you should spend, I don't know, maybe, a letter, which should be a long, 3 pages, I don't know. But you should spend at least 6 hours perfecting it. And I'm sorry, and it sounds crazy, but this is how it is. So if it took you 8 hours, maybe you spend 16 hours. So this is just how it works. You have to make something perfect, especially at the big firms. Now, at a small firm, it might take you 2 hours to write a letter and 1 page to perfect it. But a big firm, you need to turn something that's just people are like, wow. Even though you're giving the same information, you need to spend that much time. And that's just how it works. I know it sounds insane, but it's what it is. So, okay, let me just get this. Sorry. The work, when you do things, you need to spend more time proofing it, checking your citations, making sure everything's proofed, making sure, oh my God, look at this. Holy cow. Give me 1 second. Sorry. I'm sharing. Give me 1 second. Honestly, I cannot believe the quality of these questions today. I've literally never seen anything like it. Okay. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Literally, in decades of doing this job, I've never seen questions this good. Okay. How solicitous of work should a young attorney be? I've had mixed results. Some partners like it. When I'm solicitous, some will pull back and want to reach out. Is this just political, personal game of being a law firm as an associate looking for work? I've been extremely busy, need to re-up as I just wrapped up a bunch of matters. I'm very friendly and good on the phone. Use this to my advantage. How can I avoid overdoing it? Okay, so yes, partners like it when you're being solicitous. So this is actually a very good question. And again, like, wow, these questions are just so freaking awesome today. You need to be solicitous. So your job as an attorney, is to always get work, to always find work and get work as much as possible. So what does that mean? That means that as an associate, you need to chase down work and get repeat business from partners. And partners respect that because that's what they do to get clients. Even if they're blowing you off, that's teaching you different ways of going after and getting work. And as a partner, your job is to get business from, or get work from other partners, and that, or preferably, much preferably, outside clients. So that's the job. So the whole job, everything begins and ends with getting work. That's it. So when a law firm's deciding who to make partner, look at this, mega account's full. So when a law firm decides who to make partner, they might have 3 people. They might partner decisions might be between 3 people. One with 2,000 hours, one with 23, and one with 30%. So the person with the 2,900 hours obviously is much better at getting work and willing to do it than the person with 2,000. Here, when they're deciding who to make partner, it's really not even close. Like, this person is able to get more work than these people. People might say, oh, I was stay at home, I have kids, or I have other responsibilities. They don't care. If you're able to get all this work and do it, then the law firm's going to think very highly of you, because this shows that you're able to go out there and hustle. And even better, if you're like a 3,100, that's great. So your job as an attorney is to do everything you possibly can to get work. And so that's the game. And then it becomes the same game when you're doing the same thing in the public and going out and getting work as well. A lot of questions. In your webinar, you mentioned reasons for staying put in a law firm, but have you encountered instances where attorneys loyal to their firms result in missed growth opportunities? Can you elaborate? Yes. So sometimes you will join a firm, you'll be very loyal and spend your career there, and then all of a sudden they'll tell you to leave. And that happens a lot. It happens at the most prestigious firms. It happens all over the world at firms where they're loyal, and then they lose out. So the best predictor of your future is watching what happens to other people but you just watch that. So you just see what's happening. Are they succeeding? Am I doing the same thing they're doing? What's happening? And if you see all those people failing, then that's a sign that maybe the same will happen to you, or maybe you need to conduct yourself differently. What made them fail, and what made them succeed, and what made people succeed? That's it. So is it the contacts, lack of contacts? So sometimes people fail because they don't have the right people in the corner. They may get partners without business. They may have set limits on coming to the office or working weekends. So you have to understand this. So the more you understand this, the better off you'll be. If you see people not succeeding and you realize that, then it's probably time for you to look maybe at something else. And that would be what I would recommend. Okay. Next one. Thanks for my question. Your answer was very good. Clarify, I was actually an associate let go at the old firm and joined an even better firm. But my attitude from this prior experience is color my perspective in ways I'm not just realizing. It's hard to not reactively interpret everything as a sign of to be fired. Yep, that's absolutely true. I understand that. And this obviously is not going to be a helpful attitude. I'm still young, but I feel like an older person damaged goods mindset. What do you suggest doing therapy or meditation? So I'm going to say something that's unconventional, but I would research, just do searches online for self-hypnosis. I'm sorry to say this, but I made this recommendation to tons of people, and it worked. It's worked for me on whatever the issue you think is. Issue could be trust, overcoming past trauma, I don't know. But just anything to keep your mind off that. And I think that can be very helpful for you. That's how I would recommend doing it. I would do self-hypnosis. I would do that. I would also do what's called journaling. There's a famous, and again, I'm giving you like a lot of information that may be a little bit odd, but you do journaling. There was a famous course at Columbia, and it was something about becoming self-confident, or I don't know, but the idea is every day, at the end of the day, you write down everything you're worried about, just list it out. Are worried about and scared about. And that sort of thing. But you just do that once a day. Spend like 10 minutes, whatever, 15 minutes. And then at the end of the week, you go back and look at the stuff, at what you wrote for the past 7 days. So each day and you realize that a lot of the stuff that you're worried about, the idea is once you do that, then you look at what you were worried about a month ago. You'll start realizing that everything you were worried about, most of it was not anything to worry about. So that's the problem. And then what you're saying about therapy and meditation, that's a good point. I mean, meditation, the whole idea of meditation, and also psychedelic, and I'm sorry to get into it, but I know leaders of organizations and things that do this, but psychedelics, maybe like ayahuasca and things, I'm not suggesting you do these or anything illegal, but the idea is that a lot of those, the whole purpose of these psychedelic journeys, which you should read about, there's books about it and stuff, but the purpose of them is to get you out of your ego, and that's the purpose of them, but that's what meditation's about, that's what psychedelics are about. So if you're able to get out of your ego, then you're much more likely to be happier, and that's going to be much more helpful for you in the long run. So this is probably the last question that I'm going to answer, because I do have to, I can't believe how many good questions. By the way, I know there's still a ton of people still on this webinar. Listening to the stuff is probably the smartest thing anybody can do for their career, because you're learning individual, like small mistakes that people make that just destroy their careers, and ways to get around them. And I'll tell you, I hear from partners in law firms, not every week, but quite often, that learning this stuff and understanding it has like made their careers, turned them into, so this stuff can very much help you. And it's great that you're listening to this, because the more you understand, like the better you'll do. And there's not a lot of sources of this information. So what can an associate do to really stand out the pack is extremely reliable, and some of the partners want to work with, rare qualities, things they can do. So the other big thing is make people feel important. That's basically it. You compliment people, you bring out the best in them, help them see their good qualities. Again, I'm not, but one of the things that Henry Kissinger, who's very famous, obviously, and brilliant, he was a professor at Harvard when he was very young, like 22 or 5 or something. But he had this ability to go up to people and to very powerful people, to network to them and really make them feel good about him and like him and recommend. I don't know what he did, but he had some special kind of God-given ability. And so he became very powerful and famous and sought out based on making other people feel important, but also his brilliance. Again, I'm not telling you from one political party to the other, but that's someone who's very good at that. So the way you become very successful is you not only do good work, but you make people feel good about themselves. So you don't talk about their bad things, you talk about their good things. So anybody can find bad things about people or negative things or criticize their work, which a lot of people on this call have, which I understand, but they can say, oh, they don't know what they're doing and all that sort of thing. So the less you do of that, the better off you're going to be. So you have to make people feel good about themselves. You have to be there when they're down, if you do, and help them. You have to be understanding to people. I mean, nice to them when others are. All these sorts of things. These are the rare qualities and things that not a lot of people do. But the more you're able to connect with people, the better off you're going to be.
So I'll tell you one final story, and then I will probably hop off so because I'll have more questions. But this story is it's just a personal story. Last night, I was talking to my fiance, and she is trying to launch a personal brand that does soaps and lotions and that sort of thing. It has a great website and it was doing all this stuff right. And now she was thinking, oh, I need to hire a PR agency. And these PR agencies were like trying to charge like $15,000 a month on all this stuff. And because I live in Malibu and because I have kids and stuff that know people, I know people like George Clooney and who else? And what is his name? Randy Gerber launched a big tequila brand. And so did this guy named De Leon. And then there's also someone else that my kids are friends with, John Paul Mitchell, that launched this big shampoo. And these people are making hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, with these brands. And so they didn't start hiring PR firms. They started by basically John Paul Mitchell or Paul De Leon or whatever. Anyway, going out, he was making shampoo in his car and going to and making contact with all these different salons and telling them how great this product was, and grew into a huge business doing that way. And that's the same thing. These people that launch these tequila and these different brands, they send reps into nightclubs and bars, and they make personal contact and they form relationships. And then those people refer other people to them and so forth. And they basically start out by giving things away for free, by checking in and seeing how things are going. And so that was the point I was making to my fiance. I was like, you can't just hire a PR firm. Everything's based on personal relationships. This is how people become billionaires and all this sort. So it's not just because they hire a PR agency, it's because they go out and they make these contacts with individuals and they're solicitous of them. And then those individuals, in the long run, those relationships will help them. And those people that, if you're John Paul Mitchell or Paul, I don't know if you're but you're making a relationship with a hair salon and they see your company grow based on you meeting with them and getting suggestions about how to improve it, they feel like they have a role in your success and they start referring other people to you. It's the same thing in a law firm. Like you have to go out and you have to form really strong relationships with people inside the firm and make them feel like they've given you good advice and make them feel like they're part of your success instead of seeing yourself as adverse to them. Like a lot of these questions today were just all about, oh, partners are making mistakes and I'm correcting them and they're mad. No, you have to bring out the best in people and you have to make them feel like they're helping you and you have to make them feel like they're responsible for your success instead of thinking you're like the only person out there. And if you do that, you're going to be much more successful than others are. And I hope you take this advice because I watched
countless people, not countless, but so many people become successful doing this. And it's huge. It can change your life if you understand this. This is how people become incredibly successful, and it works. So again, thank you for spending all this time in this webinar. I was just amazed at the quality of these questions. I think anyone that stayed on this for the full time, which is a lot of people, you obviously are going to be way ahead of anyone else that's in this profession. And just sometimes when I was young, I listened to Tony Robbins and read books and things that were helpful. And I think that made me successful. So I'm just trying to pay it forward with this. There's obviously a charge for this, and I'm not promoting businesses or anything, but I hope this information helps you. And then we'll be here next week. One thing, because it's the start, I think October, November. Yeah, so October is the start of the third quarter. So I always do a resume meeting, and I will send information about that out. I won't do it next week because I'm going to be in New York, but I'll do it the following week, I think. So that's a good opportunity to send in your resume and then have it reviewed live. We will strip, if you don't do it, strip your name and identify information off and just black it out. But that's always a really helpful thing to see how resumes can be reviewed. So thank you everyone for being on the call, and I'll talk to everyone next week.